The House is resumed for the extended sitting. A point of order, Takutai Tashkent.
I seek leave for there to be a party vote on the first reading of the term of Parliament enabling 4-year term legislation amendment bill so that Te Pāti Māori can have our vote recorded.
Leave is sought for that course of action. Is there any objection? There is none. Clerk, please conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
49 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes in favour.
Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
15 votes in favour.
ACT, New Zealand.
11 in favour.
New Zealand First.
8 votes in favour.
Te Pāti Māori.
6 opposed.
The ayes are 117 and the noes are 6. The motion is agreed to. I call on Government Order of the Day number 12.
Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill, second reading.
Members, in accordance with the determination of the Business Committee, the second reading of this bill is followed immediately by the committee stage and then the third reading.
E te maanga o te whare. I present a legislative statement on the Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill.
That legislative statement is published under the authority of the House and can be found on the Parliament website.
I move that the Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill now be read for a second time. Kia ora te kōrero, mate aonga te maunga, te kōrero a tūroa, e rua au, he awa au, he rauru au we. E tauri ana te whakaro ki ngā tupuna o te wā, ko upane kopana nei ki runga i a tātou. Rātou huki, nā rātou huki tā mai i te tā moko a tupuna mātua ki te tiriti o Waitangi, ko ngā tupuna i roto i a Wanganui, a rere o maki, tērā wahine rangatira, tatu atu rā ki ona tungane, ki a te anaua, ki a te māwai, tā atu ki a takarengi mā, nā rātou anō i hiki te kāwanara tapu e ki nei ko te tiriti o Waitangi. Te maanga o te whare nōku te honore, ki te kawe mai i tēnei kōrero ki mua i te aroaro o tēnei whare pāremata, ki te tautoko ki te anga whakamua o tēnei pire, te pire whakataunga kareme mo te korowai o Wainuiārua, mo tōna pānuitanga tuatahi. Tēnei pire e whakatinana nei e te tihi o rai. Te kawanate i tāia mai e te korowai o Wainuiārua me te karauna i tērā tau i te hurai 2023. Me te mea nei tēnei kawanata tapu i whakatau hoki i ngā kreme hitori, hurtori hoki i raro i te tiriti o Waitangi mō te korowai o Wainuiārua. E nei e whakakanohi nei i ngā ritinga me ngā āhuatanga o ngā iwi e toru e kia nei ko tamakana, ko tamahaki, uenuku ki Manganui o te ao, nā tū kaihoro ara kei roto hoki i te ngahere nui, me te awa nui, te Wainuiārua, te wai herunga tupuna mātua, te wai tukukuri o te pō. Tēnei pire e toru o na whāinga, tuatahi ko te whakatau i ngā āhuatanga e pāna ki tō tātou tuakiritanga, me te taha pūtea, tai atu ki te whakapāha a te karauna. E ki ana te kōrero a taku hoa minita, me te kaura, a koa nei hoki a tōna pānuitanga tuatoru ka kitea I te nui me te rahi o ona āhuatanga katoa. Me te mea nei, tikana te kōrero ki te āta mihi maioha ki a rātou kununumi atu ki te pō, nā rātou hoki I kawe I tēnei kaupapa ki tōna māramatanga. Ko taku matua, boy crib, ko ia hoki he hoa futuporo, he hoa inu waipiro me taku matua paddy, ki te karapu futuporo raitihi, e hoa mā, ka nui hoki e rā pō I au e taitamariki ana, e whaiwhai nei me ki I ngā aikirimi ki ngā toa hoko o raitihi. Engari, me mihi ki a ia ki a matua boy, tatu atura ki ngā ruanoku me ngā ruahine katoa o tērā muka, o tērā ripo hoki o ngā awa e tāheke nei I te kāhui maunga, matua te toa, matua te mana, tai atu ki te matapihi ki roto I te moana nui tā poko a tāwhaki. Nā reira, mai te kāhui maunga ki Tangaroa, e tāhuni ara te whakaro ki a rātou hoki o tēnei kaupapa Te Korowai nui o Wainuiārua. Me te mōhio hoki kānui te ihi, te wehi, te wana, te wehi I whakapau kaha atu e rā momo, pērā I a boy crib, engari te hunga ora o nai anei. Ara a Aiden, tai anō ka wehi iaia, me tō mātou kāhui o te Wainuiārua ki te whare o te Public Trust, ki reira hoki tua I te whakatau I te ata nei. Me mihi ka meha ka tika ki a rātou, nā rātou I whakatōpū nei I ngā riri, I ngā namu, I ngā wanga hoki o e nei iwi, kia tau ki tōna māramatanga, mai te pō ki te ao. Tēnei pere I tukuna atu ki te komiti take Māori. I te kaumātahi o Apereira I tēnei tautonu, te kaumā ngā pepa I tukuna atu mo te pere nei, ngā tono. Me te mea nei e tāhuri ana ngā mihi kauanu ki ngā mema o tērā komiti. Ngā mema katoa, aha ko te pāti kahurangi, te pāti whero, te pāti kākariki, tō tātou pāti Māori, aha ko kōwai, aha ko kohe tōna tai, e mihi ana ki ngā mema o te komiti. Nā rātou anō I whakahoki I tēnei kaupapa ki uta. Kia tai ki tōna taunga, koia hoki ki tai ki tōna tauranga, koia hoki ko te rānei tōna pānuitanga tūrua, kaureroa, ka tai mai te iwi, ka tai mai te marea ki te whakarewa ki tōna pānuitanga tuatoru. Me te mea nei, e mihi ana ki ngā āpiha a te arawhiti, a Chris McKenzie mā, engari ki taku tuakana a Aiden, me taku Uncle Baldy, o Paura Haitana, tana ingoa a tūturu, engari tōna ingoa ko Uncle Baldy, ko ia hoki tēti o ngā amokura kai hoi o te tiro hoi waka o Wanganui, me era o ngā kuia mōrehu, ngā mārei kura hoki, nā rātua anō I tautau I ngā ahika ki ngā papakainga ki runga I te awa tupua, ko manga pāpapa tērā, ko witianga tērā, ko parenui tērā, ko tieke tērā. Me era ngā wāhi katoe ai ki te kōrero, ko te Waimarino I tēnei wā, kei whea kia mai te Ingoa National Park. Engari ko te Waimarino tērā. Nā rātua anō I kuhi I ngā take katoa o tēnei kareme, kia pua wai mai ngā moimoi a tupuna mātua. I te ata nei, I rangono hoki, I te riri, me te mataku hoki, te whakatūpato, a taku tuakana a tūrama, me taku kaihoi matua a Hayden Tūroa, e pāna ki te mata kino o nā kāwana tawhito, pērā I a kāwana kareima, pērā I a kāwana Gore Brown mā, pērā hoki I ngā tangata ko rātou ingoa e tāi ana ki ngā ingoa tiriti o te upoko tika, ko Stout tērā, ko Whitmore tērā, ko Wakefield tērā. Me tō rātou whakatūpato ki a mātou katoa o te whare pāramata I te ata nei, me kaua e whai I ngā tauira o era tangata. Engari, me hāngai hoki te anga whakamua I ēnei momo mahi. Nā reira, ko aku mihi ki a mai te nāko iti rawa, ki a Aiden mā, ki a Chris mā, ki a Paura mā, tatu atu rā ki ngā kuia nā rātou anō I whakarewa tēnei kaupapa ki tōna taunga I tēnei wā, mai te kororipo ki uta. Me te mea nei, Kore tae au te tū wahangu I tēnei wā I te mea I tā ngāngai taku pito ki te whare ora o Raitihi. Tipu ake whānau mai au ki reira, tipu ake au ki reira me te papa hahau poro, korowha ki Mākaranui, te rā wāhi motu hake I Wainganui o Hākune me Raitihi, I reiro hoki I tipu ake mātou ko taku pā harakeke, me te reo a whakapapa ngā tātai aroha ki roto ki oku ake me ngā kōiwi o ngā urupa ki Raitihi, tatu atura ki Waimarino, me ngā awa e tere maina I te kāhui manga ko manga nui o te ao, ko manga turuturu wā tatu atura ki e rā Wai Māori katoa. E te oe rā Wai Māori, ko tukuna atu ki te roimata tuatai nā te rau āmua ki te awa o Waikato. Engari, ko tōna mātotorutanga me u ki te matapihi. Mr. Speaker, the second reading today is another important step in the settlement process before the third reading. Funny that, second reading then third reading, which will result in the full and final settlement of the historical Treaty of Waitangi claims of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. I'm very privileged and humbled to have this chance to convey my acknowledgements to the exemplary work of the negotiators and in particular my Uncle Boy Crib, who used to be quite an excitable and enthusiastic colleague of my father at the Raitihi Rugby Club many years ago in the late 70s and early 80s. I had the great fortune of being born in Raitihi at the maternity ward that then existed up on the hill behind the school, and grew up in my early formative years for 7 years on Grey Street in Raitihi and on Golf Road on the first hole of the golf course of Waimarino between Raitihi and Oaxaca in a place called Mākaranui. No shop, 3 houses. It was us, the Alabis and another whānau. And so it gives me great pleasure to tautoko the progress of this Claims Settlement Bill to its expected conclusion later on this morning. I commend the Te Korowai or Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill to the House and thank all those members, no matter which party you're from or which hat you wear, for the work that has been undertaken by the Māori Affairs Select Committee to tautoko our whānau to get to this denouement of the settlement. Tēnā tātou. Katoa.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.
E te mangai o te whare.
Honourable Jenny-Anson.
A kātangi te titi, kātangi te kaka, kātangi hoki ko ahau. Ko te mihi tuatahi ke te atua, nana nei, ngā mea katoa. Ko te mihi tuaroa ke te whare ietu nei, tēnā koe. Apati hono tātai hono, te honga mate ke te honga mate. Apati hono tātai hono, te honga ora ke te honga ora. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, hui mai tātou katoa. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak on Te Korowai or Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill, a bill that represents an important milestone in the long and difficult journey towards justice for the people of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. This bill, when passed, will give effect to the deed of settlement that was signed on the 29th of July back in 2023, setting the historical Treaty of Waitangi claims of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. It acknowledges in law the huge injustices done and suffered by the iwi of Tamahake, Tamakana and Te Unuku ke Manganui o te ao. And it also lays the foundation, most importantly, for the future in which Te Korowai or Wainuiārua can claim their rightful place as the kaitiaki of their whenua, their awa and their taonga. The grievances of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua are real. They are lived experiences that have shaped generations, experiences of war, dispossession, economic deprivation and cultural loss. These are the grievances that echo through the centuries and continue to impact on whānau, hapu and iwi in Aotearoa. Te Korowai or Wainuiārua have long occupied the central North Island. Their area of interest spans well over 600,000 hectares, including large parts of Te Whanganui and Tongariro, national parks, the Upper Whanganui River and the National Park Township. Their lands are bordered by the rohe of 8 other iwi, reflecting the rich and interwoven histories of tangata whenua across that region. However, the story of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua in the past 2 centuries has been one of relentless pressure, forced conflict and systematic alienation from their whenua, their rights as tangata whenua. The first great wound came in the form of war that forced ancestors of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua into conflict, sometimes with their own kin. The Crown's relentless military campaigns in Whanganui saw communities devastated, land taken, and traditional structures of governance and authority shattered. The second wave of destruction, Mr. Speaker, came through the relentless march of Crown purchasing. The supposed agreements and transactions that happened in the 19th century were often conducted in bad faith, with the Crown failing to uphold its promises that it set aside to protect tribal reserves. Instead, vast areas of land were alienated, leaving Te Korowai or Wainuiārua virtually landless today. Public works taking then compounded the loss. Land was seized for hydroelectric projects, for railway construction, for defence purposes, always with little or even no regard for the rights and well-being of the people who called this land their home. The construction of the North Island main trunk railway, for example, cut straight through the very heart of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua lands, yet the iwi were left without benefit, without redress and without their whenua. Perhaps most wrongly were the large tracts of land that were taken in the creation of Tongariro and Whanganui national parks. Parks that remain places of great natural beauty and cultural significance, yet those parks were established without the consent of the very people who had cared for these lands for generations. In effect, Te Korowai or Wainuiārua found themselves strangers in their own whenua, their connections to their tūranga waiwai eroded by the actions of successive governments. The loss of land was devastating, but this was not the only loss. The Crown's actions and omissions led to generations of social and economic deprivation. Without land, economic stability was impossible. Without economic stability, communities struggled. Poverty took root where prosperity should have flourished. Opportunities for advancement were lost and few, and state policies only deepened that divide. Alongside the economic impact came the slow but deliberate erosion of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua's cultural and societal structures. The decline of te reo Māori, the fragmentation of traditional governments and the undermining of tribal identity all resulted from the Crown's neglect and active suppression of Māori rights and culture. These losses are quite simply immeasurable, and no settlement can ever fully restore what has been lost and what was taken. But today, through this bill, we acknowledge these injustices and we take a step towards reconciliation. The settlement provided for in this bill is long overdue. It is a recognition at the highest level of the wrongs committed against Te Korowai or Wainuiārua, and it represents a promise that such injustices will never be repeated, even though we have the Treaty Principles Bill. Part 1 of this bill contains a formal historical account of the injustices suffered by Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. It includes the Crown's acknowledgements and, crucially, a formal apology. Words alone cannot be enough, but they are necessary, and they mark the Crown's acceptance of its past failures and signal a commitment to a different future together. The second part of the bill provides statutory acknowledgements over 22 areas and deeds of recognition over 13 separate sites. It provides opportunities that restore the role of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua as kaitiaki over their land of deep cultural significance. It makes changes to official place names, ensuring that the stories of whenua are told in the language of its people. The vesting of 19 cultural redress properties, including 3 that will be jointly held with other iwi. and it includes Te Korowai o Wainuiārua and the governance of the Tongariro Taupō Conservation Board and the development of its conservation management strategy. I think that's what's called co-governance. These provisions ensure that Te Korowai o Wainuiārua can reclaim their rightful role as the guardians and protectors of their land, with a voice in decisions that affect themselves and their rohe. The final part of the bill outlines the commercial redress that forms part of the settlement. This includes the transfer of significant commercial properties, such as the former Waikuni prison site and the Crown Forest land at Eroa. The bill also grants Te Korowai o Wainuiārua a right of refusal over specific lands in the future, ensuring that, should the Crown make land available, the iwi have the first opportunity to claim what is rightfully theirs. Beyond what is contained in this bill, there is also financial and commercial redress of $21.7 million. Cultural redress agreements with the government agencies include a revitalisation funding of $6.85 million. These are not handouts, they are not charity, they are a small portion of what was unjustly taken, returned in recognition for the historical ongoing harm inflicted upon Te Korowai o Wainuiārua, and they are but a drop in the bucket of what was lost by these people. Mr. Speaker, this bill has progressed through Select Committee and we considered the amendments and it is important to acknowledge that there have been good changes done through the Select Committee process. We also acknowledge the ongoing dialogue between Te Korowai o Wainuiārua and Ngāti Hauā regarding those overlapping interests. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, this settlement is not the end to this journey, but an essential step forward, not only for Te Korowai o Wainuiārua, but for Aotearoa. It is a recognition of the wrongs in our past, our commitment to a partnership going forward, and a pathway to a stronger, more just future. Te Korowai o Wainuiārua, I acknowledge your endurance, your strength, and your unbreakable connection to your whenua and your whakapapa. This bill is for you, your tamariki, and your mokopuna. May it be a foundation upon which you can build, thrive, and reclaim what is yours. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Speaker.
Hannah Lindon.
Kiko, tirohia, kei hea te taunga, o te titi, waitori, pare maira, koe i te tautara, e nono titaka te tau te mauri, kataina maira, koe i te koka, koaka, kia whakatau. Ki te manu tui a i te puaotanga, ka whakapurua ki te remu o te huia. Ka whakarongo ki te tangi a te kawea maira i te tomatotanga o te tomairangi e rongo koe i te pawharauroa kui whiti ora. Kia whakapainga ki te manu tawhi o rangi, ka puta ka ora nā e. I tēnei ata i noho tahi mātou me mapare mata ki te taha o ngā uri o te Korowai o Wainuiārua, tamakana, tamahaki, uenuku, me te rongo i te mamai o te ngākau. Tō rātou ki, he koko ngā whare ka kitea, engari he koko ngā ngākau e kore e kitea. Nō reira ki runga i tērā taimahatanga me te rongo i te tangi hotu o te iwi ki roto i te whare e mihi kauana kia rātou. Ahakoa, ka hore rātou ki konei e tika ana me mihi atu. Me tēnei pau Tēnei mō tia nā te mārei kura, ko kiko tērā. Hei honore, hei hononga kia rātou, ko mene atu ki te pō, me te maha o ngā whakāhua, te maha o ngā ika, I kawea mai tērā iwi o Te Korowai o Wainuiārua ki roto I te whare, nō reira e te iwi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Tamakana, tamahaki, uenuku, e mihi ana kia koutou. I mihi to these iwi, these humble iwi that come before us for an important day for their people and for their mokopuna into the future. Because we heard very clearly today, as they came into the whare for a pōwhiri, the heaviness of the heart and the many photos that they brought of their mate who have passed during the negotiations process and their leadership, the tribal leadership, who have carried the mamae of their ancestors through the negotiations. I acknowledge the chair, I acknowledge the negotiators, and I acknowledge those on the Crown side who have done the work to come and bring this settlement to fruition for the uri of Tamahaki, Tamakana and Uenuku, otherwise known as Te Korowai o Wainuiārua. Because as they shared, this is a tough time for them as they reflect on the opportunity of today and what today brings, but tomorrow there are still challenges ahead in terms of what is a Crown Māori relationship. It was shared clearly with us in the pōwhiri, the way with which they still hold and worry about the prejudice that Māori face tomorrow, today, and what they are facing right now with laws and acts of the government of the day. Landlessness is a key theme of the people of Wainuiārua, and I pay tribute to them for the tolerance that they have had as a people, tolerance and patience for the Crown to finally honour Te Tiriti o Waitangi in some small way. This settlement goes a small way in righting the wrongs of the past. It's not an easy thing to be labelled, to be profiled and to be called rebels in your own territory. It's not okay that these people came with open hearts to a negotiating table, carrying those burdens of the past, the blood spilt, the land lost, the fact that much of it was taken through public works and for the benefit of all New Zealanders. And now we come to this point whereby they do still carry the mamae, and I want to pause and just reflect on that mamae, because getting to this point of settlement has been a long fought journey for Te Korowai Wainuiārua. And while we might give them 1 to 2 cents in the dollar for this settlement today, it is about what is the enduring relationship with the Crown. And much of what they have within their rohe is within DOCA state. Much of what they have within their rohe is in private hands. We have national infrastructure going through their tribal rohe. And so what mana whakahaere do they get into the future in their tribal rohe is a question that always weighs heavy on my heart when I think about the losses and the way with which these people were branded rebels. In the whai kōrero this morning, we heard from those who addressed us about the colonial footprint that Aotearoa has and the way with which colonial oppressors, those who represented the Crown, whether it be Wakefield, Onslow, Hobson, they're all commemorated in street names, they are commemorated in school names. And how do we hiki that? How do we actually bring forth the stories so that New Zealand does understand the work of the New Zealand company and its impact, the footprint across the rohe? How do we tell those stories so that we have a stronger, better connection as New Zealanders to our colonial history, so that Te Korowai Wainuiārua can stand and say, yes, this is a part of the colonial footprint in our rohe, and this is what happened to us. Because there was a lot lost, whether it be the Ruapehu purchase and where they had 40,000 acres within the Wanganui area in 1848 taken for £1,000, and there were meant to be reserves set aside, or whether it was to put that national infrastructure like the Ririway, the railways that go right through their towns, their villages, how do we tell the story of loss? And that was something that came through in the Treaty Principles Bill submissions from Veronica Tawhai, may I share, where she said actually there's a huge amount of research, there's a huge amount of stories told in the Waitangi Tribunal, whether it be the technical research, the tribal histories, or the evidence presented. How do we uplift that and make it something that New Zealand can listen, learn, share and understand better? Because the settlement here today is a part of just one part of the story of Te Korowai Wainuiārua. The benefit that they have of having this building block of the $21 million in commercial redress is just part of their journey. But actually the journey of the tribe to get to this point in the 184 years since the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi is important for community, for our schools, for our civic leaders to understand as a part of our maturing as a nation. So that, as we heard this morning from Kai Kōrero, we're not going to hide e Ngātahi, we're going to hide e Takirua, iwi Māori and te kāwanatanga. And I thought that was a really nice way of putting it, that actually we will work on our side as iwi Māori, and then as kāwanatanga, you work on your side, and let's try and move forward together with a really strong, meaningful relationship. And I think that this is a good stepping stone to provide a financial building block for the people. There are relationship agreements in there. And I think about, the Docker state, because there's a huge Docker state within their tribal rohe. They have aspirations for ecosystem restoration. They have aspirations around how they can chaki the tile. And it is hoped that through the agreements and the relationships of this negotiations and the settlement, ultimately, that Te Korowai o Wainuiārua has the opportunity to put their hands on the steering wheel and then start directing what is the strategic future for these lands and territories within their rohe. Now, when I think about some of what is being given back, it does come with a lot of mahi ahead. And I think about our PSGEs and how we can build capacity and capability, because we're just unlocking the door of capacity, and how do we support as the kāwanatanga to grow the capability so that the iwi can move forward with confidence. These are some questions that I have in my head as I consider the settlements that come through, is that we are opening a door and providing resource, we might provide lands, mountains, rivers, and then how do we support building capability so that they can move forward with confidence, working alongside the kāwanatanga, tari kāwanatanga, kaunihera even, in their own tribal rohe. I will continue on asking these questions throughout the day, and look forward to seeing our people join us after they've finished their parakuihi. Kia ora.
Mark Cameron.
Morning everyone, thank you very much. I'm going to lean on my ignorance. I don't know a lot about this piece of legislation. I sit in the Maori Affairs Select Committee, and it's been a pleasure this morning to hear some of the oratory and the speeches shared about Te Korowai, Wainuiārua and their history. Mr Speaker, as you rightly point out, the bill acknowledges the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi Wanganui in 1840. Tapuna of Korowai o Wainuiārua sought a bit of partnership with the Crown, and clearly evident from the speeches this morning, that relationship didn't come to its fulfilment. The bill acknowledges the Crown breached the agreement and failed to protect iwi, hapu and whānau of Te Korowai o Wainuiārua. The cultural redress regards geographical names, membership of conservation boards and advisory committees. Mr Speaker, the Crown's failure to actively protect Te Reo o Wanganui, or breach of Tiriti o Waitangi, and I think this is something the House is continually canvassing, certainly heard that this morning. Thus, the Crown acknowledges that in the second half of the 20th century, Te Korowai o Wainuiārua children who attended Crown-established schools were punished for speaking their own language. I don't happen to speak Māori, I speak another language, and I would be horrified if I was punished for speaking that. This is something of a nonsense, and yet sadly this happened in our history. They were declined, beg your pardon, to speak Te Reo. Try and reconcile that. Major areas of change in the bill affects and matters contained in the deed of settlement signed between the Crown and Te Korowai o Wainuiārua 29/2023. It provides for the final settlement historical treaty claims resulting in Crown actions or omissions before September 21, 1992. The redress and some of the funds appropriated are $21 million in financial and commercial redress. Seems like a small amount given the inordinate loss of land and life and property that went through this journey of these good people. 6.8 million in cultural funding so they can enhance what it means to be the people from this area, Te Korowai o Wainuiārua. The return of 19 sites of cultural significance and 12 commercial properties, including Crown Forestry land at Erua and the former prison site, which was formerly mentioned. Conservation management redress to support establishment of a predator-free proof eco-sanctuary. What a lovely idea. I think that is certainly something that the Crown would be interested in partnering with these good people with. A seat at Tongariro Taupo Conservation Board and various other relationships with Crown agencies. Mr Speaker, I won't over-litigate the issue. I'm looking forward to the company of these good people when they come in for the third reading later on today. I think it will be a pleasure to learn more as the speeches traverses the process in the House. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It is a privilege and a pleasure to rise on behalf of New Zealand First in support of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill. And I'd just like to begin my contribution, Mr Speaker, by acknowledging the Honourable Tama Pōtaka, who led our Parliament this morning in the second reading of this bill. And one of the beautiful things that we get to witness is the whānau connection that we find our colleagues, our parliamentary colleagues have when we're speaking to claim settlement bills, and noting that the Honourable Tama Pōtaka was raised in Raitihi in the area that we're talking about regarding this treaty settlement bill. No shop, 3 houses. That sort of takes us and gives us a very clear picture of the life that he grew up in a place that we're talking about today. Yes, it has been a long and difficult journey, as Ginny Anderson has mentioned, and Huhana Linden noted also the tolerance of the iwi of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua throughout this settlement journey. Mr Speaker, Te Korowai or Wainuiārua Treaty Settlement Bill acknowledges the historical breaches of Te Tiriti o Waitangi by the Crown towards the iwi of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. Now, these breaches include the acquisition of really significant lands, and no one could doubt that, anyone who's traversed the North Island through those regions around Ruapihu, the Desert Road. It's magnificent country. These breaches also with failure to consult or adequately protect the iwi's interests and the detrimental impacts on the iwi's culture, that's without question. The language, we've mentioned that here today, and with great impact also on the socio-economic well-being of the whānau there. The bill outlines a deed of settlement which will serve as a formal agreement between the parties detailing the terms of reconciliation, including land settlements, financial compensation and cultural revitalisation initiatives. And that's the forward-looking part of this treaty settlement journey, that there is that revitalisation, that's the restoration of economic well-being through the financial redress. Mr Speaker, our New Zealand First position is that we believe that treaty settlements must be final, just and forward-looking, and that's why I mentioned that here. These historical grievances must be addressed in a way that is really sensitive to the past, but also actually allows the iwi and the wider community to look forward and move forward together. Settlements such as this one, Mr Speaker, are essential to that restoration of economic independence and the construction of cultural identity, so that the iwi have the means in which to construct their own future, reclaiming their power, not just culturally, but also from an economic position as well. Mr Speaker, I would like to talk a little bit about the historical grievances that relate to the experience of war in Whanganui, which forced Te Korowai or Wainuiārua, their ancestors, into conflict with each other, conflict with their own kin. I think it's a really hard thing for us to imagine what that would be like today if we were forced to fight our own family. The Crown purchasing and the failure to make and protect tribal reserves. The public works takings, in particular for hydroelectric generation, defence purposes, and the construction of the North Island Main Trunk Railway line. Being made virtually landless, in particular at Tongariro and Whanganui National Parks, the decline of Te Reo Māori, and the fragmentation of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua tribal structures. Those impacts are huge and they reverberate for generations. Mr. Speaker, the cultural redress as part of this treaty settlement will provide statutory acknowledgements over 22 areas, deeds of recognition of over 13 areas, 2 overlay classifications, changes to 5 place names, the vesting of 19 redress properties, and provisions for iwi involvement in the Tongariro Taupo Conservation Board and development of the Tongariro Taupo Conservation Management Strategy, and commercial redress, which will provide $21.7 million in financial and commercial redress. Just acknowledging, Mr. Speaker, the committee process, which was didn't really seem that long ago now that we had our first reading, and then it went off to the Select Committee. It was referred to committee on the 11th of April 2024. They considered submissions from 14 interested groups and individuals and heard oral evidence from 8 submitters. I'd like to thank the chair of the committee, Dan Bidwar, and the rest of the committee made up from members from across the House for the work and diligence of shepherding the bill through. They recommended all amendments unanimously, and there were a number of amendments, changes relating to the Erua Forest Sanctuary, changes to Part 3 around commercial redress, also land adjacent to Waimarina Reserve in the National Park. So there were a number of changes that came through the committee and all recommended unanimously. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, as it is important that we are here and ready for the third and final reading when the whānau come to the House, I'd like to conclude my speech by saying New Zealand First supports this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Takutai Tashkent.
Mātua tama, wairua tapu, me nāna hirapono me te māngai hei tautoko wai. Tēnā koutou i te whare i te iwi whānui o Te Korowai o Wainuiārua, tēnā koutou katoa. I te pika, as a mokopuna of te whānau hikinui o Mangamingi Marae in Raitahi, I rise today with a heart full of aroha and respect to mihi to you, my whānau, for your relentless work and to support the Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill. This has been a journey of struggle, a journey of heartbreak and of resilience. For generations, our whanaunga of Uenuku, Tamakana and Tamahaki have fought for their right to be recognised for their whenua, for their reo and their tino rangatiratanga. I te pika, today this bill is one step towards honouring that fight. The mamae carried by Te Korowai o Wainuiārua is not just a story of the past, it's the lived experience of our people. The raupatu, the confiscations, the alienation from our whenua left our own landless. As previously mentioned, the Crown acquired land for public works, including hydroelectric generation, defence, and to build the North Island Main Trunk Railway, leaving Te Korowai o Wainuiārua deprived of our own potential. They were stripped of the ability to exercise kaitiakitanga over their taonga. The Crown action severed their connections to the whenua, to our reo, and most importantly to each other. And yet you, i te iwi, have fought relentlessly with dignity to get to this very moment. Today's settlement returns the tools which were wrongly taken, which can now be rightfully used for rebuilding, the restoring of reclaiming the mana that was stripped away. Importantly, this reaffirms our right to kaitiakitanga over our whenua within the Whanganui and Tongariro National Parks and ensures that our taonga are protected with the love and manaki that they deserve. E te pika, this is about more than compensation. It is about reclamation, it is about mana motuhake. It is about protecting our taonga for our mokopuna. One of the most exciting parts of the settlement is the vision for the Pōkaka Eco-Sanctuary, a kaupapa that embodies what this settlement is really about. This will not just be a conservation project, it is a calling, a recognition, a way to bring back the mātauranga of the past to shape our future. It is the commitment to ensuring that the whenua is protected, that the ngahere thrives, that the manu, the kiwi, the whio, the kārearea all return home. This is about the next generation growing up knowing they are the rightful kaitiaki of this whenua. Despite this government running rampant on our people over the last 16 months, from this day forward, they are legally bound to the expectation and acting in a good faith to the Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. No longer can the government make decisions about Te Korowai or Wainuiārua without them at the table. Their voice, their whakaaro, their mana must be recognised and upheld. They can try and legislate the treaty away, but by supporting the settlement today, every member in this House acknowledges that you are the sovereign, always was, always will be. This is a foundation for the future, a future where the decisions affecting these lands are made with their rightful kaitiaki leading the way. Let's be clear, no settlement will ever be enough to truly compensate for the harm that was done. We cannot undo the past. We cannot bring back the whenua that was stolen, the lives that were impacted, the pain that was that was caused. But what we must do today is ensure that this redress sets a foundation for the future, that the tamariki and mokopuna of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua grow up knowing that their history has been acknowledged, that their rights have been restored, that their people stand tall. To the Korowai or Wainuiārua, ngā mihi mai oha kia koutou. To the negotiators, the kaumātua, the leaders who carried this kaupapa on their shoulders, you have done your people proud. Your perseverance, your patience and your dedication to the justice have brought us to this moment. E kore e miti miti te puna o mihi e kia koutou. This is your moment, this is your time. Ka tika, ka tika, ka tika. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
E te pika.
Benjamin Doyle.
Whakataurangi ake te here I taku a te pupua ki ne te mauri o te aroha. He hononga ki te iwi kua whakangaro ki te po uri uri ki te po I oti atu ke ngā whakao ati here a ki te rangi he huarahi atu ti he mauri ora. E te pika e te whare, e ngā paipai tapu, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko tēnei te wā whakatau I te pire mahurangi. Nōku te honore hei tautoko ana au mō koutou uri o Te Korowai o Wainuiārua. Mr. Speaker, I extend my most heartfelt and profound thanks to the many descendants of Tamahaki, Tamakana, and Uenuku, who have made the journey here today, and to those too who have not. 185 years have passed since the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and with the flow and ebb of time, so too have generations arrived and departed. And so I acknowledge with love those who have been carried here in spirit and in heart, those ancestors and elders for whom today has come too late. Te Korowai o Wainuiārua will have gathered today to witness the passing of this bill into law, so that the journey of truth and reconciliation, of healing and redress may begin a new chapter. We in this House, Mr. Speaker, have the immense honour and indeed duty to stand on behalf of the Crown, to bear witness and give support to this piece of legislation. As this bill is set down for all remaining phases in the House today, I wish to give a brief call for the second reading, and will follow with a more substantive address during the third reading. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill to the House. E rere ana te mauri aroha ki a koutou. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the second reading of the Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill, and I rise as a member of the Māori Affairs Select Committee, very privileged to be part of that committee, and really get a deep insight into our treaty settlements and what the kaupapa involved with coming to the point that we are now, the second reading in the House. And at this moment, if I can start, please, by acknowledging members that have travelled to Parliament to listen to our second and third readings, and thank you very much for we all took part of the pōwhiri this morning. It was very beautiful, it was very moving, and thank you for bringing those photos of your ancestors, your relatives that have unfortunately passed along the way, waiting for us to reach this settlement. May their souls rest in peace. I'd like to also acknowledge, sitting beside me is our current chair of the Māori Affairs Select Committee, David McLeod, an excellent colleague and local MP. But also I'd like to acknowledge my mate Dan Bidwa, who was the chair when we were going through this process. And you know, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the second reading, we reflect on that select committee process, how we opened up for submissions, and what took place before and during the submissions, and indeed after. And as has been traversed very briefly, Mr. Speaker, when it came to the submissions, we received 16 submissions, 14 public submissions, and 8 of them, I think it's very important to acknowledge today in the House that 8 of these 14 were opposed to the bill. And the opposition was around a few concerns. And in the process, usually we try as a committee to go out to the whenua to listen to the submissions in a marae or in a local community hall. And with this situation, we tried a few times, didn't we? But unfortunately, there were some sad circumstances with the iwi that there was a tangi, and we had to cancel going to you. But I want you to know that we really would have loved to come to you, because it's only the right thing to do. But thank you as well for trying to do that and accommodating us in the absence of that. And with respect to that, the opposition to the bill, I want to reassure those that did oppose that we really asked some deep and profound questions of the advisors. And in the end, we felt comfortable with the mandate process, and we felt comfortable with what we saw before us. And I know as we've traversed in the House many times, that the treaty settlement process is not perfect, and some would say it's flawed. But it's what we're working with, and we're trying our best. I know that the advisors and the negotiators and those from our iwi try their best to come to what is a good and workable and to an extent fair situation for going forward. But nothing, as I've mentioned many times in the House, nothing actually will suffice to repay for the deep loss and the deep grievances that you rightfully have. And I guess for me, as a person that was not born in Aotearoa, New Zealand, coming to New Zealand, and the more I learn about the history, the more my heart crumbles. One, with how little we know, actually, and how little many of our fellow Kiwis know about the horrific history that many of you have gone through. And two, my desire and my hope is that we learn so that people will understand when treaty settlements are made, there's a reason why, there's a recognition of these grievances. Mr. Speaker, just very briefly, I'd like to also recount just some main objectives of the settlement package, if we can put it that way. The deed of settlement was signed on the 29th of July 2023, and if I can be just in essence recount, that it includes a financial and commercial redress of a total of 28.5 million in total. And that's broken up 21.7 million in economic compensation and 6.8 million in cultural revitalisation funding. And there's also land and cultural redress, Mr. Speaker. 19 cultural sites returned to iwi, rightfully so, statutory acknowledgements of over 22 areas and deeds of recognition of over 13 areas, and 5 place name changes. And we heard from our colleague Huhana Linden that when names are given that actually refer to a very negative moment in history, how can someone go ahead and continuously see those names and not feel a building of mamai, as we say? Mr. Speaker, there's also going to be conservation and environmental redress, and this includes the Tongariro Taupo Conservation Board allowing iwi to contribute to environmental management, and also commitment to Pokaka Eco Sanctuary, a long-standing aspiration, as we know, of our iwi to really restore our native species. And with this, Mr. Speaker, I see that our beautiful guests are making their way into the gallery. So I will end it at this, if you may, and we'll listen to the rest of our colleagues around the House. But in this second reading, I commend the bill.
Honourable Penny Henare.
A tēnā koe te māngai o te whare, kāti ko taku mahi, tuatahi hei tautoko ake i ngā kōrero whakatau minita pōtaka i te atanei. Ahakoa ki hei wā tātou manuhiri rangatira i taimai, i whakatau ia i te kaupapa o tēnei pire ki roto i te whare. Me tāku e ki atu ana ki te hunga wā tātou manuhiri rangatira e noho mai nei ki runga, ko te āhuatanga o taku kōrero i te pānuitanga tuarua o tēnei pire, e hara tēnei te whakahē i ngā mahi kei roto i te pire. Hoi no ki aroha mai ki tēnei e wero atu ana i te āhuatanga o tō tātou atane. Mr. Speaker, I want to stand in the second reading and I'm glad the minister's here, to express my dismay at the way that the process was ran this morning. Now, I appreciate that it's an agreement that we might try different things where we can have the second reading, the committee of the whole, and the third reading all in one sitting. My knowledge is that this House makes those rules and also makes the process. In my 11 years here in Parliament, that is a process that has rarely been done. And there are reasons why you don't truncate a process. And that is so that we can plan and schedule. That is so that we can continue to hear submitters, we can make sure that the expectations of thorough due diligence on bills can continue to be heard and prosecuted in this House from the first reading to the third reading. That's a well-known function of this House. That's why we have the first reading, the second reading, the Committee of the Whole and the third reading. And for our whānau that have walked in and our whānau listening at home, we know the first reading introduces the bill. The second reading discusses what the committee heard through select committee processes. Submitters, those for, those against, those with their own ideas. And then, of course, technical amendments are made in the Committee of the Whole. And then finally, it comes into legislation, or comes into law, into effect after the third reading and its royal assent. Now, it's already been described this morning in the speeches, the dissatisfaction of not just our whānau that have come here today with the settlement process, because this is true about every single settlement that's been done. A dissatisfaction with the process of that settlement. However, our whānau and our iwi and our hapu endure because they want to look towards a bright horizon. And I accept that. And I congratulate them on that. And you've heard words in the House this morning that we acknowledge the whānau for their humility and their willingness to work on a way forward. However, when we look at these processes with respect to how it's worked this morning, and you know, it was clear that by the time the second reading started, our whānau weren't here. Now, we control that. We control that. And in the 6 years I was a minister, I had never seen anything like that. And in fact, we'd have a second reading, and then we'd invite at another time that works with our whānau that come in here for the settlements to come in, and we have a pōwhiri process at around midday, and then we had the third reading in the afternoon. That allowed a far more inclusive process that allows our people to be part of something that's truly special. And we all agree to that. We all agree that this is special. But I want to put on the floor and on the record in this House consideration for the Minister that as we progress other settlements, that we look towards this process and do something that's far more agreeable, not just for the whānau that have come so far to be here, but also for the House, for the satisfaction of the House and the members within it to make sure that we get these things right. And that's important. And one of the reasons why I say this to members of the House is I think about my own people of Ngāpuhi. And if Ngāpuhi, who currently have over 500 hapu, and a Ngāpuhi settlement wants to be achieved in whatever way, shape or form, that's entirely up to the Minister. I accept that. But to have a truncated process that might see people miss out on readings in this House, a process that this House controls, is simply unacceptable to me. And I'm expressing that dissatisfaction here on the record and in the presence of the Minister in the hope that we can work across the House, and I know the Business Committee does what the Business Committee does, but this is a suggestion whereby we can do this and do this better. That's the point I'm making. So that our whānau can be a part of this, so that second readings and Committee of the Whole House are actually proper functions performed properly in this House as they were intended to. Because I bet for some of the whānau in the House here, in the gallery here today, as we look to make technical amendments in the Committee of the Whole, what does that mean? Because it's not getting the proper scrutiny that one might expect when these bills pass in this House. And like I say, Mr. Speaker, I've been in this House coming up 12 years, seen a whole number of settlements pass through this House. And we've all agreed, not all of them are perfect. In fact, Māori give far too much in their settlement, but that's their agreement and that's what they negotiate with the Crown. But for processes in this House, those are things we control. And I think we can do better. I think we can do better. There are a number of settlements that are coming up into the future. And of course, I've already mentioned a potential, whatever that might look like, Ngāpuhi settlement. I can tell you, there'll be an expectation that every single process in this House will give that particular settlement bill the due diligence to make sure that every voice of the 120,000 plus ngāpuhi in this country is heard. That's the least we can expect, because that's the process that this House has determined for the passing of legislation. But more importantly, that should be the process that allows our people, regardless of their iwi or hapu, to have their voice heard on such important pieces of legislation. That these settlements are enduring. That they are, as my tupuna described, ka titia ki te ngākau, ka prania ki te rai. Titia ki te ngākau, prania ki te rai. That they are enduring in the heart and forever branded on your rai or in your memory, on your mind. Not the failure of a process that we can control. That shouldn't be the enduring memory. The enduring memory should be that whatever we decide and pass in this legislation that's been negotiated and hard fought for by iwi in negotiation with the Crown should be the enduring memory. Not that sadly some of our whānau are only just walking in on the second reading of their bill. That's the problem I have. And I can see the minister scowling towards me, but that's a fact. This House controls that process. The minister controls that process. And that's what I want our whānau here today to hear. And I apologise at the start of my kōrero, because I know that when these bills pass through the House, there is agreement across the House on these matters. Of course there is. And there will continue to be through the third reading. But as I said in Māori, I make no apology for challenging a process that this House controls. We can do better, whānau. And I say that to my colleagues across the House, we can do better. Because it's one thing, and if you check the Hansard and all the records on all the settlements in the 12 years I've been in this House, and I've heard people say, well, you know, ka aroha or aroha mai, and all these nice things. But hey, we control this process. Let's do it better. Let's do it better, whānau. Hoi no e te māngai o te whare ki roto i taku miniti whakamutunga. Ka hoki atu anō ahau ki te taumata o aku kōrero. I ngā kōrero whakatau a mini ta pōtaka ki wana whanaunga maha, kua tatu iho mai ki roto i tēnei whare. E mōhio nau ko oti ke ngā mihi ki runga o pipitea. Engari he whare anō tēnei. Hoi no tāku hei karanga mai ki te kaupapa kua whakakahu i tātou. Hei karanga mai anō hoki ki ngā mana, ki ngā tapu, ki ngā ihi o a tātou rangatira, o a tātou whānau kua tae mai i te rānei. Nō reira e oku rangatira, e oku tini whanaunga. Hei te mōhio au ko te tini o ngāpuhi e heke iho mai ki roto i a koutou. Mahi reri wei, mahi toparaka. Hoi no ko a tātou whakapapa e noho ngātahi ana. Me te whakaai ki tēnei pire, a taiho ake nei, ka timata te pānuitanga tuatoru, ka haere tonu ngā kōrero e pāna ki tō koutou ake kaupapa e te māngai o te whare, kia ora tātou.
My understanding is that we are truncating some of the speeches and that we are going to...
No,
Kusha tangaire meno.
Tēnā koe i te māngai o tira tēnā rawa atu tātou katoa, kua hui mai i tēnei rangi a tāhua, tēnei rangi te tiro whakamua, tēnei te mihi atu kia tātou katoa. Hoi anōra, ka tautoko a wau i ngā mihi kua mihia ki tō tātou nei rungarawa, nāna i tai pai mai koutou ki tēnei whare o tātou. Nau mai, haere mai. Hoi anōra, ki te kōrero au ki te wāhi ngaro, tēnei te mihi atu kia rātou mā, kāre i tai a tinana mai. Nā rātou i timata, i whakawhāriki hia tēnei ara, hei takahia o koutou tapu wai ki konei, tēnei te mihi atu kia rātou mā. Hoi anōra, kia rātou mā, ngā mate huhua o tēnei rā, haere atu rā koutou. O tira, huri noa kia tātou, tihei mauri ora. Tēnei au e mihi atu kia koutou, Te Korowai o Wainuiārua, hoi anōra koutou a tamahaki, a tamakana, a uenuku iwi. Ko te tikanga me mihi atu kia koutou i te tuatahi. nā koutou tēnei rangi. Aha kua he rangi tiro whakamua tēnei, kei te rongo tonu au, i te pauri, i te taumahatanga kei runga i a koutou. Nā reira, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou, i tai humārie mai ki roto i tēnei whare. Nei rā te mihi. Ki toa atu o tēnā ko huri au i nāi ki te kāwana o te rā. O tira kia koe Minita Goldsmith, kia tama pōtaka te kai kōrero tuatahi i tēnei rangi. Kia Dan, tētahi o ngā tiamana o te komiti Māori. Hoi anō rā kia koe i tēnei rā Dave, te tiamana hau. He whakātu tēnei, he whakātu ranga tērā o te humārie o tēnei iwi ki tēnei whare. I'm just going to turn to English now, Mr. Speaker, and once again welcome you and thank you for coming here and the demonstration of grace and patience you have shown this House and the Crown. I just acknowledge the 4 ministers and the chairs of committees that you have had to deal with. That is a demonstration of grace and patience, and a demonstration that while there are frustrations out there, Aotearoa, about the process of treaty settlements, iwi continue to demonstrate their understanding of partnership and their grace. In one hearing, I have named 4 parties they have had to deal with, demonstrating their commitment to the future of a positive relationship with the Crown. So tēnā koutou. Hoi anō rā i runga i tērā, ka hoki ngā mahara ki tērā o ngā menita, ara kia Andrew Little, nāna i timata i tēnei ara i tō koutou taha. I just want to acknowledge a quote that Andrew... Well, first of all, I want to return to the loss that you have suffered. And while this is a great day and a day of opportunity, there's just no way we can understand what you have been through for generations. And I think Andrew Little, summed it up when he said you were left virtually landless. Kāre e taia te whakahua i te ngau o taua āhuatanga. Just saying, we can't understand the bite of that pain, that agony. And so, me kōrero tātou mo te wāriu, the value of the settlement. So, it's been acknowledged, the redress package includes $21.7 million in financial and commercial redress, $6.8 million in cultural funding, the return of 19 sites of cultural significance and 12 commercial properties, including Crown Forestry land at Erua and the former prison site at Waikune, conservation management redress to support establishment of a predator-proofed eco-sanctuary at Pōkaka, and a seat on the Tongariro Taupo Conservation Board, and relationship agreements with a range of Crown agencies. I want to talk about value, or te kupu Māori me kira te wāriu. Haha te wāriu o te whenua. And for my non-Māori colleagues, one thing that you will be able to understand is in Māori, whenua is also the placenta. The placenta which gives sustenance to the child. And so when you take that sustenance away from people, how they have survived, endured and thrived when their sustenance was torn away from them must be acknowledged, must be understood beyond the value written on this paper. However, he timatanga noi ho tēnei kia koutou. I had the privilege of hearing some of the submissions on the Treaty Principles Bill. I was told to keep this dignified, and I shall. And it was an honour, and I left filled with hope. But I just want to reiterate something. A phrase, treatyism, was coined. And I want to reiterate, as has been acknowledged by every part of this House, through that sustenance, lives have been lost, generations and future lives impacted. People have gone. They are not here to see the conclusion of the path these people have taken on behalf of their tipuna, a path they are treading with grace and dignity because they demonstrate the understanding of partnership. You know, you look at whenua, we have gripes when someone builds their fence a metre on our land. They were left virtually landless, and here they are, demonstrating partnership, accepting the apologies of their partner. I'm sorry. They are here in good faith. And we need to remember that as we traverse Aotearoa and the world, and people come at us with phrases like treatyism, as if we are doing a favour to people who are settling. They are doing this crown a favour, maintaining the dignity of their tipuna and demonstrating that they understand partnership. Hoi anō rā, hei whakakapi, tēnei anō te mihi, kei te tū whakaiti au I mua I a koutou, hei mema o tēnei whare. Aha koa he iti enei koha, kua hoa atu kia koutou, he timata noiho, ko te tumanako, kei te mōhio pai au, ka oraro atu o koutou mokopuna I enei rawa. Nā reira kia koutou tamahaki, tamakana, uenuku, tēnei te uri a Ngāti Porou, e tūwhakaiti I mua I a koutou, e mihi kauana kia koutou, kua tae mai, I runga I tō koutou ake mana motu hake I tēnei rā. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou katoa.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill, second reading.
This bill is set down for committee stage immediately. I declare the House and Committee for consideration of the Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill. Committee.
Morning. Members, the House is in committee on the Te Korowai Te Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill. Members, we come first to part one. This is the debate on clauses 3 to 22, preliminary matters, historical account, acknowledgement and apology, and settlement of historical claims. The question is that part one stand part.
Mr Speaker, I just want...
the Honourable Minister.
Chair, the Korowai or Wainuiārua Claims Settlements Bill was first introduced in the House December 2023. Since that time, a number of changes to the bill have been identified as necessary. The amendment paper is needed to make technical amendments to the bill, which are identified by the Parliamentary Council Office. Minor changes also required to the relevant law by the courts. The technical changes include correcting reference to ministerial portfolios and inconsistency with the timeframes and board membership under the RMA and reserve banks. A minor change also made to allow Te Korowai o Wainuiārua the opportunity to exclude the Māori Land Court jurisdiction from being applied. These amendments are minor and do not change the redress package.
The question is that the Minister's amendment to part one set out on AP number 248 be agreed to. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that part one as amended stand part. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Members, we come now to part two. This is debate on clauses 23 to 156, cultural redress, and schedules 1 to 4. The question is that part two stand part. The question is that the Minister's amendments to Part 2 set out on AP number 248 be agreed to. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that Part 2 as amended stand part. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Members, we come now to Part 3. This is debate on clauses 157 to 213, commercial redress and Schedule 5. The question is that Part 3 stand part. The question is that Part 3 stand part. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that Schedule 1 stand part. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that Schedule 2 stand part. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that Schedule 3 stand part. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that Schedule 4 stand part. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that Schedule 5 stand part. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Members, we come now to our final debate, clauses 1 and 2, title and commencement. The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. I'll report this bill with amendment.
The House is resumed.
Mr Speaker, the committee has considered the Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill and reports it with amendment. Mr Speaker, I move the report be adopted.
The question is that the report be adopted. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill is now set down for third reading. The Honourable Paul Goldsmith.
Mr Speaker, I present a legislative statement on Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill.
The legislative statement is published under the authority of the House and can be found on the Parliament's website. The Honourable Paul Goldsmith.
Mr Speaker, I move that Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill be now read a third time. Tūhoe moriora. E te atua no te kororia. Ko koe te timatanga me te whaka o tinga o ngā mea katoa. Te whare e tū nei, tēnā koe. Te papa I waho nei, tēnā koe. Te mana whenua o tēnā reuhe e te Aotearoa, tēnā koutou. E nā mātei, haere, 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 haere ki te wāhi naro, haere, haere atu rā ki te pō. E te hunga ora, tēnā tātou katoa. E koro tamakana, tamahake, uenuku ki maanga nui o te au, nā tū kai horo, tēnā koe. E te kāhui tupua, I mihi ana. And welcome to this House, everybody. Mr Speaker, it's a great privilege to stand here today to support the third reading of this bill, Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill. I'd like to extend my warm welcome to the members of Tamakana, Tamahaki, and Uinuku ki manga nui o te au, nā tūkai horo. Three iwi of the central Wanganui region who are represented in this settlement negotiation. Thank you all for coming here to Parliament today. It was good to meet with you this morning and to have a wonderful time together. I also want to welcome those who could not be here in person, who are watching online or on television. I want to start by thanking all those on the iwi side who have led the settlement negotiations over the past decade, in particular Aidan Gilbert, the chair of Uinuku Charitable Trust, Chris Mackenzie as lead negotiator, and negotiators Paura Haitana and Steve Hirini. Thank you for your dedication to this significant milestone. And this settlement is a testament to the hard work of many people negotiating with the Crown. And as I said this morning, I don't think the average New Zealander understands the amount of effort that is put into negotiating these settlements, often by volunteers on their weekends, in their evenings, travelling large distances, and getting plenty of advice from many people and the challenges that come with that. So to the people of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua, you have endured a long wait to settle your historical claims, and I acknowledge your patience, your commitment and your fortitude. I also acknowledge the work of the Chief Crown negotiators, Rosemary Banks, and more recently Catherine Gordon, and the officials of Te Arawhiti and other partner agencies who supported this effort. I want to acknowledge Ministers of the Crown, past and present, and in particular Andrew Little and Chris Finlayson before him, and thank you for all your support in achieving this. Significantly, I want to acknowledge those members from Te Korowai or Wainuiārua who are not with us today and cannot witness the outcome of years of effort, courage and commitment to achieve the settlement, and our thoughts are with you today. Today marks the final stage of the progression of this bill. It's been a long settlement journey. The first Wai claims were submitted to the Waitangi Tribunal in the 1980s. And although no settlement can fully atone for the Crown's past injustices or compensate for the hurt that the people of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua suffered, it's my hope that we can look forward to the future where Te Korowai or Wainuiārua and the Crown work together for the benefit of future generations. The passing of this bill will give full effect to the deed of settlement between Te Korowai or Wainuiārua and the Crown, signed at Rai Tihi Marae on the 29th of July 2023. The deed acknowledges historical Treaty of Waitangi claims relating to the area, acknowledges the Crown's past acts and omissions that breached the treaty, and recognises the injustices and the pain that those injustices caused. In May 1840, 14 rangatira signed the Raukawa Moana Treaty sheet at Wanganui, placing their trust in the Crown. The Crown failed to uphold its responsibilities under the treaty to respect the tino rangatiratanga of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua, and to actively protect the taonga that Te Korowai or Wainuiārua wish to retain for their descendants. The people of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua have suffered as a direct result of the Crown's treaty breaches, causing them to endure significant economic and social deprivation. The Crown did not protect the interests of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua when it purchased their land blocks to facilitate European settlement and development. In the early 20th century, the Crown continued to purchase their land and compulsorily acquire land for large-scale public works. Land was then used for the North Island Main Trunk Railway, scenic reserves, defence purposes, power generation, and was included in 2 national parks. These treaty breaches have undermined the well-being of Uinuku, Tamakana and Tamahake and left their people virtually landless. Many of their people have left their homeland, and their ability to retain their language, culture and tribal identity have been severely weakened. Mr. Speaker, as I said, no settlement can ever fully provide compensation for the wrongdoing of the Crown or make amendments for the enormous suffering and hurt Te Korowai or Wainuiārua have endured across many generations. And we do acknowledge that. However, it is my hope this settlement will be the beginning of a strengthened relationship between Te Korowai or Wainuiārua and the Crown, based on partnership, mutual trust and cooperation. This bill seeks to give effect to their settlement package as outlined in the legislative statement. The settlement provides financial, commercial and cultural redress totaling $28.6 million. It includes the transfer of 19 sites of cultural significance, 11 land-backed properties, including the former Waikune prison site, and 39 properties on a deferred selection basis. The settlement recognises and supports the aspirations of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua to establish a wildlife eco-sanctuary at Pō Kaka near Waimarino. The eco-sanctuary will bring together tikanga and traditional practices, conservation best practices and research in a dedicated predator control plan, so that kaka, the blue ducks and other birds and wildlife can again flourish in that region. The settlement will contribute towards supporting the aspirations of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua to help the iwi to grow their economic base, provide housing for their whānau, develop their culture and enhance the natural environment. And it's my sincere hope that this settlement will provide the basis for a positive future for the people of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua, and a renewed relationship with the Crown based on respect. So thank you all again for coming today. This is a special occasion. One of those rare occasions when the House comes together as one, recognising our past, recognising the wrongs that have been done and seeking to make amends. Mr Speaker, I commend this bill to the House. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
The Honourable Penny Henare.
Tēnā koe te māngai o te whare reo Māori. E oku nui, e oku rahi, I mihi hia te ao Māori ki runga I te papatū waiwai I te matatini. I te matatini I whakakahu I te ao Māori I ngā mate huhua o te wā. O tēnā kāinga, o tēnā kāinga, o tēnā kāinga. Ka waiata hia tātou I ngā waiata. Ka maringi roi mata o te hunga mate kua riro atu. Nā ka kawea mai te mauri o tō tātou hui huinga o te matatini o te kāhui maunga ki tēnei kaupapa kua whakamine mai tātou I te rānei. Kei te pērā tonu ngā whakaaro. Kei te maringi tonu ngā roimata. Po te hunga kua ngaro atu ki te pō. Te hunga nā rātou tēnei kaupapa I kōkiri hia ki roto I ngā te kautau kua kōrero mai nā I te minita. O tātou tūpuna I mate I te wā o te pakanga. O tātou tūpuna I peia I o rātou whenua. Ana kia noho manuhiri ki runga I tō rātou ake whenua. Nō reira, koe nā tāku mea atu ana kia tātou e oku rangatira kei te maringi tonu mai ngā roimata. Me te mōhio, I nā maringi mai te roimata, ko te hia kia mā te whenua. Kia timata anō tātou te ao Māori, o tira koutou e ngā tapu nui, te tirohia ki te taumata moana, ki te ao āpopo, ki o tātou reanga hou kei te haere maine. Nō reira āpiti hono tātai hono, rātou kia rātou, āpiti hono tātai hono, tātou kia tātou. Nā, I te pānuitanga tuarua o te pire, I kake mai etahi o koutou ki runga ki tēnei whare, me te mea anō hoki kua kite atu koutou I te whare o Penny Henare. Taku amu ki ngā nekehanga kua kitea e au I taku taima ki roto I te whare pāremata. Engari I tēnei wātonu ka tai atu ki te pānuitanga tuatoru, te pānuitanga whakamutunga o tēnei pire, me ki pēnei taku kōrero ki a koutou e oku rangatira, ko ngā kokonga o te whare ka tāia te kite. Engari ko ngā kokonga o te ngākau e kore tāia te kite. Koina te hohonu o tēnei mahi. Koe nei te hohonu o ngā mahi I oti a koutou, tōku tuakana Chris ki te atua hau I a koe koutou. Ngā ringa raupā I kōkiri hia I tēnei kaupapa. Ko kōrero mai te minita I ngā kōrero tika, mo tēnei tū āhuatanga, te mahi tatu ngā kreme a te iwi ki moe te aroaro o te karauna. Hei te tika wāna kōrero. E hara I te huarahi māma, he huarahi uaua. He hanei te utu, ko te tangata. Ko te tangata te utu. Kua kōrero mai te minita mo te āhuatanga o etahi, kāri I konei te rāne, nā, koina te take kei te maringi tonu mai ngā roimata. Aha koa te āhuatanga o ngā kōrero kei roto I tēnei pire. E oku rangatira kua kōrero atua hau mo te ekenga o ngā puhi ki roto I a koutou ki te mahi reri wei ki te topa rākau, ki te whakatō rākau anō hoki. O tētahi o ngā kupu ki roto I au nei, ana ko te pōkākā. Ki te nuinga o ngā iwi, ki tāku e whakapai nei ki roto I ngā rārangi kupu o te reo Māori. Ana ko te pōkākā ki roto I a mātou, ana he pare kura ki roto I etahi atu iwi. Ana, koina ko tā mātou o ngā puhi ka kia, he pōkākā, he parawhenua mea. E kōrero ana mo tētahi matenga nui o te ao Māori. O tētahi pakanga, ana koia ka mate te tini o tātou. I au e pānui atu ana I enei kōrero kua whakarite hia e ngā kai whiriwhiri, ana me te karauna, koina au e tautoko atu ana, engari ka whakaaro ake mo te āhuatanga o ngā kupu kei roto. Hea te take I tapaina wā tātou tūpuna I tēnei ingoa ki runga ki tēnei wāhi. I tēnei ingoa ki runga ki tēnei mahi. He rangatira ki roto I tērā mahi. Me he mea ka tirohia tātou ki o tātou reo Māori, ka kite atu, hea hei konei I mua I te tāinga mai o te Pākehā. Hea I konei I te tāinga mai o te Pākehā. Hea kei tū atu I te wā I peia e te Pākehā I a tāua. Koina te pai o te reo Māori. Ne. I te ata nei, I whakatau koutou ki runga I te marae o pipitea, hoa, mohi ana tāua te āhuatanga o te pipi. He kai pai ki te Māori. Engari hei te mohi o ahau, ko te, ko te takutai, ana ko te one pū ki raro iho nei ko tōna ingoa tika, ana ko Waiteti. Nā, hei te mohi o ahau, hea te take ka tapaina ko Waiteti ki runga ki tērā wāhi. No reire I au e pānui ana I ngā whakaritenga ki roto ki tēnei pire, ka kite atu ahau I te māramatanga o a tātou mātua tūpuna. Wāna kōrero, I marere iho mai ki a tātou I tēnei rangi, ki o tātou uri whakatupu e haere ake nei. Koenei ingoa, koenei kōrero, ko te hia kia kaua e ngarono atu. Kia utonu ki roto I te ngākau o koutou, kia utonu ki roto I te ngākau o tātou. Kia kaua ngā memo o te whare nei e pōhehe a nā kua oti noa taku pānui tanga tuatoru o tēnei pire. Ka hore. Aha koa ka oti I te rāne, hoa, ka timata ngā mahi, ka kōrero hia ki roto I te pire. Nō reira, koina tāku atu kia tātou I te rāne. Koutou I rongo atu I taku pahu I te ata nei, ana he maha wene momo tatunga take tiriti kua kitea e au ki roto I ngā te kautau kua pahure ake nei. He ahua rere ke te nuinga, he ahua orite ki etahi. Engari, ko ngā rere kētanga ka kite atua hau ki roto ki tēnei, kei te aro matua, ko te aronga matua o koutou ana kia tiakina I te whenua, kia tiakina te whenua mo te paenga o wā tātou tamariki mokopuna, ka kite atua hau. Koina tāku e tino miharo nei. I taku tāinga mai, I taku tāinga atu ki te marae o Raitehi I taua taima, ko au te minita mo ngā take turuhi, mo ngā take tāpoi. Nā, ko etahi o koutou I haria au ki te wāhi e kia nei ki roto I te pire, ko pōkākā ki te taha o Waimarino. Nā, I kite atu hau I te whenua rā. Kātahi rā te miharo. Kia miharo anō hoki nā te mea, kua whakarite hia e koutou hei painga mo ngā uri whakatupu. Mo te tai au. E nā mea katoa e tino ngākau nui tia ana e koutou, o tira e tātou katoa o Aotearoa. Nō reire e tātou mā i mea mai tōku hoa rangatira ki au neina tā te mea koia tetahi no mōkai pātea. Ko tiro atu ki ngā whakaritenga ki roto i te pire nei, kātahi ia katangi. Katangi ia mo te āhuatanga, ahakoa ngā mahi kua whakarite hia. Engari ko te mea ki hai tutuki hia ki roto i tēnei o ngā pire. Ana i taua taima, anō hoki, ko au te minita mo ngā take wa waunga, arā ko te Minister of Defence. I kite atua hau, i te whānui o te whenua, i tango ake e te karauna mo ngā take o ngā titu matauenga. Ko kite atua hau. Ko rongo atua hau ngā kōrero a tēnā iwi. Ia taima, ka whakapakari a ngā titu matauenga i a ngā titu matauenga, ka pahu anō te pū. Ka pahu anō te pūrepo. Ki hei rātou i whai whakaro ki te āhuatanga o te Māori. Me te mea nei ka rongo atu i te pako o te pū, ka pēhea te wairua me te mauri o te Māori i nā rongo atu i te rāmahi. Ko kite atua hau. Ko kite atua hau. Nō reira koina tāku e tautoko atu ana i te whakapāhā te karauna ki a koutou. Engari, hei te mōhio ahau, he nui tonu ngā mahi kei mua i a koutou, kia whakatika hia e etahi o ngā tuāhuatanga ka whakarite hia i te pire. Kārea no ka whakarite hia i te pire. Nō reira e oku rangatira ki roto i ngā hekona whakamutunga māku. Hoi no ko tāku hei tukuna atu rā koutou ki tō koutou wā kāinga. Mā te atua koutou e manake e tiaki ki roto i te roa ngāke o tō koutou hoki ngātu ki te wā kāinga. Me te roa ngāke, me te nui ake o ngā mahi kei mua i a koutou, o tira kei mua i a tātou, ki te whakatutuki i ngā oati e oatia e o...
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. E tangi hotu nei kia koutou ngā uri o rātou mā mo te kuhu mai ki roto i tēnei whare pāre mata mo tēnei pānuitanga whakataunga, kreme mo te triti o waitangi E mihi ana ki ngā mate maha kei Wainganui a koutou pīkau mai nei tēnei ata me te taimahatanga ki runga i a koutou Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. He tū whakaiti tēnei ki mua i te iwi. Tamahaki, tamakana, uenuku. I taku noho ki roto i te whakatau ka rongoa hau i te mamai. Ngā taimahatanga o rātou mā. Te rironga whenua, te hamahama o te kāwanatanga, ki runga i a koutou, ki runga i te iwi Māori. Nō reira, haere mai ki roto i tēnei whare pāremata, haere mai ki roto i tō tātou whare pāremata, kia rongo mātou i tērā mamai e pīkau nei i a koutou i ngā taumaha. Mr Speaker, in sitting in the whakatau this morning, I felt very clearly the wairua of those ancestors that our iwi brought into the whare. And I acknowledge all those mate that come on your shoulders and all of those that you have lost through the generations. I'm very mindful of the burden of knowing and feeling and experiencing landlessness. For landlessness is what has affected you, being labelled as rebels, as ho-ho, of losing land, of seeing railways and national infrastructure imposed upon you without your consent. I understand and I feel that mamai when you know that you have lost elders who have waited for far too long to see this negotiation completed. Because it's the Red Book that dictates this negotiation, Chris? It's the Red Book, and it's a Crown-imposed process. This isn't our rule book, it's not an agreed process, because it's a Crown policy that dictates how it's going to go. So I acknowledge you and your patience and your grace. I acknowledge the way that you have come as willing tangata whenua, signatories and uri of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, who said, "Nah, mea nei, time to redress the wrongs of the past, time to redress the loss of Ruapehu, time to redress all those riri ways across your rohe, all that dockland, that sits there. E mihi atu ana ki Aotearoa, nā rātou te whiwhi. And so your patience and your grace in a long negotiation that was Crown determined brings you into this house. And I acknowledge that, yes, you're going to get 1 to 2 cents in the dollar. Yes, you're going to get some mountains, rivers and a few co-management agreements. And it is great to see that you're getting a pōkaka eco-sanctuary that you can whakahaere. And yes, may you charge. May you charge. Because nā te wera o tōrai ka whakahaere e nei whenua. At what point will you get rangatiratanga over your lands, assets, resources and people as Te Tiriti o Waitangi guaranteed you? And so I have riri as well, because I am taimaha for you, for what you have suffered as I read the history of the peoples, and knowing that we enjoy driving through Desert Road. You know, we enjoy it, eh? We take the selfie, we got the pictures, but that's your whenua, that's your maunga. And yet it's been given to the people of New Zealand, public works. Nā wai e teka, nā wai e teka, he mahi pai tēnei ki runga i tiwi Māori, ki runga i o koutou pokowhiwhi, ki runga i ngā tūpuna. So yes, I'm an angry ngāpuhi, like my tūngane, but I'm also really honoured to be here to address you because, you know, when we had the first reading, it was a rush process too. Remember, we just quickly picked up and you just came. You know, we need to be honourable in this space. That if we're going to genuinely look to our past, agree on a package, and then move forward into the future, hand in hand, rangatira ki te rangatira, may we take the time. May we take the time and not rush our iwi kāinga, because you've been waiting for 84 years, for some type of redress. You've been waiting for a really long time. And yes, you have a package to start a rebuild, but I also think about the capability, because we have capacity that will be coming, but it's also the capability to move forward into the future. So your rangatira, your young people are a part of the now and into the future. And as Te Rōpū Kākāriki, we stand here humbly before you as colleagues and as whanaunga and say, a job well done to those who did the work to negotiate this. But where is the Honourable Crown? Where is the Honourable Crown? For this 1 to 2 cents in the dollar is not enough. May you continue on and strive for your rangatiratanga, for tō tātou rangatiratanga. Kia ora tātou.
Ko Benjamin Doyle.
Ka tangi te titi, ka tangi te kāka, ka tangi hoki ahau, ti hei mauri ora. E te pika o te whare tēnā koe, e ngā uri o ngā iwi e toru, o te korowai o Wainuiārua. Ko tamahaki, ko tamakana, ko ue nuku. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou i o tātou tine mate kua whetū rangitia. Koutou kua wehi atu ki Hawaii ki nui, Hawaii ki roa, Hawaii ki pā mā mao. Haere, haere, haere atu rā. Tēnā anō koutou kua tai mai nei ki te whare pāre mata o Aotearoa. Koutou kua mauria mai o mamai, me o aroha i te kaupapa whakahirahira nei. Kaore tēnei he whakamutunga, engari he tīmata hau. Kei te tika ana te kōrero i o tātou tupuna, ti tiro whakamuri, kōkiri whakamua. Mr. Speaker, this is not the end of the story or a relationship, but one of many unfolding and infinite beginnings. Such is the nature of whakapapa, that we may simultaneously look to the past and the future through the lens of the present. In this way, we must acknowledge those who have come before and who are yet to arrive, the ancestors and descendants of Te Korowai o Wainuiārua. They are with us now and forever through the power and transcendence of whakapapa, an intrinsic connection shared collectively through their tupuna, tamahaki, tamakana, and uenuku. They also share in the kaitiakitanga that connects them to the whenua in which they reside and are the original custodians, an ancestral descent from the Waimarino Plains, Te Kāhui Maunga, and Te Awa Tupuna o Whanganui. The lands of Te Korowai o Wainuiārua were once covered in ancient ngahere, tall forest ecosystems which housed abundant native wildlife. There are stories of the noisy kākā, once so ubiquitous, their resounding call saturated the soundscape. It is for this reason that Te Korowai o Wainuiārua have aptly chosen the name Pō Kākā for their eco-sanctuary, a visionary act of restoration and care. Though, let us reflect also, e te pika, on the reasons this eco-sanctuary is so needed in the first place. Why is it that native birds like the kākā no longer sing in multitudes? Why is it that ancient ngahere no longer cloak papatuanuku from mountain to shore? To restore is to bring back what has been lost, or in this case, what has been confiscated or destroyed. The taking of lands for reserves, railways, roads, defence purposes, a prison. The intensive logging of native forests and subsequent destructive of habitats. The severance of peoples from their rights and customary practices of guardianship, cultivation and connection is a textbook example of colonial domination. At the hands of the Crown, ngā iwi o Te Korowai o Wainuiārua have been left virtually landless. The deed of settlement describes the devastating effects of these violences, which continue to impact upon Uri to this day. E te māngai, it has been said many times by people much wiser than me that a treaty cannot be settled. It must be honoured. This bill goes some way to address the agony caused at the hands of this very institution we represent. It seeks to forge a pathway forward by addressing the realities of the past, realities which cannot be erased, but for too long have been denied and ignored. The return of lands, of rights, of names, these things are so important because they are so fundamental. Whose record is regarded as true or official, whose history is held up as accurate, is so often a matter of cultural dominance. Under colonisation, the script is written by the Crown and reified by historical amnesia. It seeks to erase the Indigenous narrative in an attempt to justify the unjustifiable. Those heinous acts of invasion, confiscation and violence. E te pika, today the record is set straight and the account, a lived reality, inherited pain is recognised and recorded. E te pika, e te whare, e rauranga tira mā, e tautoko ana au e tēnei pire, nā reira tēnā koutou katoa.
Cameron Luxon. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Hapu whānau of Te Korowai o Wainuiārua, tēnā koutou katoa, tamahake, tamakana and uanuku. Ngā mihi. Thank you for coming here today to listen to the Crown, acknowledge what has been agreed to in this Treaty Settlement Bill, acknowledge also my colleagues who have spoken so far and spoken about whether the Red Book is an interesting term to have heard, and it describes a lot about what can be seen when people are trying to come together and understand each other, and processes that can be imposed or not, but your grace, which has been spoken to, your forbearance, what you have done by coming here today to listen to the Crown speak an apology to you, bringing those ancestors with you that haven't been able to come here today and hear it. Thinking about how to deliver my speech, I thought back to my time when I spent a year building in Ohakuni and Raitahi, and I stayed when I was down working. I'm from Tauranga, so I had to come down and work and stay for a few weeks at a time. And the cold, drafty house that I was staying in, and I thought about the strength, the unbelievable persistence of your tipuna who managed to survive in a thriving ngahere full of kai and that, but also, I was wondering, what did these guys eat? how do you sustain yourself when the growing season's not so long? And the knowledge that was brought by your tipuna on how to survive on that land, but also the ability to travel around the vast areas to gather kai was something that can't be addressed by simply acknowledging the massive amount. I think I've got here 411,196 acres, which is a term for measuring land, but how do you measure the paths and the tracks and the places where you could gather kai? It's hard to measure. And so the ability for the tipuna to survive up there just shows what resilience that you have managed to hold on to proudly, and through the great strength that has allowed people who landlessness is a term we've heard in these speeches so far. So, to maintain that strength, that cohesion, and your whanaungatanga between everybody during a time when you're not, you always had a place that was your land, but whether the title said it or not. I think about some other things that I've heard today is place names and the history of what you can learn when New Zealanders, I encourage you to take interest in place names around New Zealand and the Māori names for places, because it unveils a history that is always, the etymology of the word can lead to a great deal of understanding about the people, the actions and the past of an area. And pōkaka, stormy, sharp, I don't know what the dictionary says, but I can well imagine there's a story behind that I would love to hear. So I think I congratulate you on all that. I don't want to tarnish this third reading speech in any way. I just would like to address something that the House has heard regarding how this process is going about today. This House has a kawa, a tikanga about it, and one of the things is a business committee that structures a day, and the business committee represented by all parties. All parties agreed to our structure today, so just wanted to put that out there. But that shouldn't take away from this moment that can be bittersweet to those who feel like it should go further and more, but also sweet in a way that we can move forward and taste the fruits of the work that's going to come ahead from what you have got a setting here today to work on for your whānau and your hapu. So look, I could talk more about things I don't know about, but I don't think that's going to do anyone great edification or a good use of your time. But I sincerely would like to pass on behalf of the party which I'm speaking for, the ACT Party, our sincere apologies as part of the Crown, and also our support for this bill. Thank you very much.
Well, on Jenny Marcroft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. E Te Korowai o Wainuiārua. Nau mai, haere mai ki wangenui I a mātou, te tōranga pū. E hari ana tōku nākau ki te tū I tēnei wā ki te whakamana, ki te whakarangatira I a koutou, me te whakamama I ngā mamai kua kawea e koutou I ngā taumaha kua pāhure. Ko tēnei rā, he tohu nui mo te tika, mo te pono, mo te whakahoki I te mana kua roa e tangohia ana I a koutou. Ka mihi atu ki tō koutou manawa nui, ki tō koutou ki te kaupapa, aha ko ngā uutanga. Kei konei mātou he hoa haere, hei pou tautoko I tēnei ara hau kua huakina mō koutou mō ngā uri whakaheke. Anei te tahi uri no hokianga whakapau karakia e mihi, kauana ki a koutou. He poto te tangata, he poto hoki te kōrero. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, huri noa tēnā koutou katoa. Mr. Speaker, in the Māori language, our Māori language, what I said was Te Korowai o Wainuiārua. Welcome. Settle in amongst your politicians. I am overjoyed that the injustices, the pain, the suffering, the wrongdoings against you are finally acknowledged. I also acknowledge your perseverance and dedication, the many hardships endured to get you to this point. We, Parliament, stand in support as you, the new generation, move forward in a new direction. I, a descendant of Hokianga, acknowledge you all. I am short, and so is my kōrero. Greetings to you all, and again to everyone here. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to give a little explainer. My father was born in Hokianga in 1925. In December this year, it'll be 100 years ago since his birth. Now, he was of a generation where his mother would not teach him the reo. So I grew up in a family that didn't speak the reo. So I have great understanding of what loss of language means. And the reason I talk about my father is, well, it just occurred to me about 5 minutes ago too, but one of the other reasons is the connection with Maungarua Pehu. He, in the 1950s, loved tramping, helped build a hut on the mountain, and so growing up as a child, we would go through that area and spend time tramping and skiing. And he used to say that he was the only Māori on the maunga who was a skier. He also met my mother there, proposed to her there. We also got snowed in many times and had to walk down the maunga as little kids in our frozen little waiwai, crying, thinking it was the most dreadful thing because of how cold it was. But really it was a place of great warmth for my family and the wonderful memories we shared, and I just wanted to share that with you today. Mr. Speaker, Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill, and as I mentioned in the second reading, it is really wonderful to stand in this House today and hear the stories and the connections to a place that our other members, our colleagues across the House have to relating to the place that we're talking about relating to a treaty settlement. So I acknowledge all those members who connect to this area as well. It's really lovely to remember my memories of this area, also travelling up and down the country, which I've been doing regularly over the last 8 or so years, getting my daughter to and from school down in the Manawatu and university, and driving and carting horses up and down, and we always stop on the desert road somewhere and take photos of the beautiful maunga, and we're always in awe. Mr. Speaker, my colleague, and I must pass on greetings from my colleague, the Honourable Shane Jones. Mātua Shane sends his well wishes to you all alongside that of my leader, the Right Honourable Winston Peters. In the first reading speech, Mātua Shane talked about the tangata whenua from that part of the North Island which he regards as the coldest that God ever put breath into. However, the warmth of the people should not be underestimated. And there is some warmth, great warmth in the House here today. Mātua Shane also talked about how it's a complicated settlement. And although modest in fiscal size, its complication derives from many instruments that are in there. It's complicated because it represents a great deal of responsibility to monitor and to exercise oversight in terms of the multiple pieces of land and the statutory representations that are reflected in this Act, which you have to share with a number of your neighbours. And of course, having those overlapping interests require another level of relationship and managing and nurturing those relationships. And so we wish you well into the future with that. He also mentioned that involvement in the Māori political economy, we know that number one, it's not easy, and number two, if it's not carried out in an efficient manner, it can be very, very burdensome. So we hope and send you good wishes that as you manage those relationships into the future, there is benefit for everybody. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make comment. My colleague and whanaunga from across the floor, Huhana Linden, who mentioned Ngāpuhi and being a little like an angry Ngāpuhi woman. I think that the kōrero that you bring really, we must release our anger. I think it's really important that when we hold on to anger, whether it's through grievances that the Crown has created to make sure that that anger, that trauma, doesn't settle into the DNA, into our own DNA, because when we pass it on to our children, we pass on a burden to them that we should not be doing. So I hope in terms of this treaty settlement and through this process that we get to a point today at the third and final reading that you're able to leave in this house your mamae, that you cast it down upon this place so that you no longer carry that burden of trauma and pass it on to your future generations. It's important that you do that today. Mr. Speaker, New Zealand First believes that treaty settlements must be final, just and forward-looking. New Zealand First has always been committed to fairness in treaty settlements. That entails ensuring some settlements are complete and that they maintain the mana of the relevant iwi, and that they do not lead to ongoing disputes or competing claims, and that these treaty settlements actually restore the mana of the Crown. It's critical that settlements are substantial when it comes to economic and commercial potential, so that the iwi can make viable economic bases for the future of their children, because it is about the future. While we don't forget the past, we must release the pain of the past so that we can move forward into the future. We support this bill because it provides a just and enduring solution for the people of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. It's an act of reconciliation and accountability. It ensures that this settlement marks the end of the historical grievances for this iwi. It's also about being just, ensuring the Crown acts as it should, and giving Te Korowai or Wainuiārua the foundation to build a better future for all of your people. I commend this bill to the House.
I call on Te Korowai.
Tēnā koe te pika. Ko Aotearoa waka ko tipua o rorangi te tata. Te hoe ko koutu ki te rangi ngā tai e riwaru. Whakarongo ake rā ki te reo koruarua I pari te taitonga. E pā oro atu nei ki te whenua tāhora, ki te whenua tōmato. Tau atu rā ki te awa tūpua. E rere kau mai te awa nui mai I te kā ui maunga ki Tangaroa, ko au te awa, ko te awa ko au. Kei ngā uri o te Wainuiārua, ngā uri o Tamahaki, o Tamakana, o Uenuku, tauti mai rā ki tō koutou nei whare. Nā koutou tēnei rā ki te waka nui, ki te waka hōnore. Nā koutou e waka pau kaha I roto I ngā taumaha ki a tutuki ai tēnei kaupapa. Nō reira, haere mai koutou, waka kotahi mai tātou, I runga I te aroha, I te tika, me te rangi mārie, pai mārire. As an uri o Mururau Patu, a mihi, tū ngā uri o Mururau Patu. As a uri o te hauhau, a mihi, tū te uri o te hauhau. As an uri o te kāhui maunga, a mihi, tū te uri o te kāhui maunga. A mihi, tū te tihi o te rai. I share your hurt, I share your trauma, I share your deep aroha for our nation. The Crown were kino in their land grabs. They were greedy. They still are. We don't believe in final settlements. I need to probably refute everything the last speaker said, but I'm trying to keep on the kaupapa. We don't believe in any finality to te riti, because it must be honoured. It's not a settling document. It's not like a jam jar. You preserve it. It settles, puts away on a shelf. It's our living being, our essence, our hope.
And I want to be really clear today that we support ngā uri o Uenuku, Tamakana and Tamahaki. And I support what my whanaunga Adrian Rurafi said in the first reading. There's a reason why those names aren't well known. And so I'm going to say it again. Uenuku, Tamakana, Tamahaki. There's a reason why people don't know where to look for these iwi. And they tried really hard. But today I dress and I celebrate in your resilience, because not only are you up there, you're down here too. You're in the house, you're out of the house, you're on the house, you're around the house. And we salute the fact that even colonisation couldn't take you out. It could not succeed. And we celebrate your resilience. Because what would this house have done? Imagine Hobson seen us dressed here like this. Governor Gray, John Bryce, Fitzroy, Hobson. Imagine their horror. You survived, and despite what everyone else thinks, you thrive. Eki. You never left the ngāere. It might be on a piece of paper, and ka pai. Huge mahi, Chris. I'm mihi to you. Always loved you. Always proud of your mahi. I'm so proud that you're with our grassroots whānau, because so many only want to go to the flash kaupapa. I'm so proud that you could feel and see and hear. They never left the ngāere, never left our whenua, never left our maunga eki pieces of paper. And there's a lot in this house to show that in spite of, despite of, as Matatini proved, we thrive. And we're coming back in a way that the world is so excited to see. There's a lot to be sorry for in this place, and there's really never enough making up. But we must continue to remind ourselves that we don't need to be taught how to work together. We have wakapapa. Wakapapa is something that no one else can take off it, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. But we just have to remember the strength and the power of our wakapapa. That is the story of Aroha. Aotearoa, New Zealand ma. This is a love story. This is a love story of our whānau who, despite and in spite, have shown their love and deep forgiveness for everything that this paruwhare has done. Everything. To our PSGE trustees, Aidan, Gilbert, Hayden Tūroa, Tawhiao McMaster, Uncle Baldy, sorry I didn't know your real name, Marilyn Karimu, I'm so sorry, I was trying to think what is his real name, my brother-in-law Wayne Cribb, James Foster, Missy Edmonds, Greg Robinson. Let your pain strengthen your progress. Uniting is progress. Restoring Waimarino is progress. Remembering to remember is progress. 11% increase in every membership is progress. Asserting our tupuna names is progress. Remembering and asserting iwi names is progress. And I think we have to remind ourselves and our mokopuna of the progress that we potentially will always be in this nation. Fostering whanaungatanga is something we're really great at, and no one else in this country can do it like we do. I want to reflect on a few things too that we've seen go down in these settlement processes, and the fact that you must not be strangers to this house. So while everyone will sit here and unanimously agree that Te Tiriti is important, so is everything else connected to Te Tiriti. I want you to never forget those who tomorrow will forget you and what honouring Te Tiriti looks like. He wano, I want us to return back to the kōrero. I am deeply in honour of you, not just because of our whanaungatanga, but also because of the relationship that you have in giving me my nieces and my mokopuna, Colleen. We have, for years and generations, had wakapapa together, and I am absolutely in awe of the fact that you manaaki my sister, that you manaaki our whānau, and that you have brought us back together in wakapapa, in marriage and mokopuna. There's something that we had shared that my brother-in-law, and I remember also many who have passed, including Boy Crib. I don't know how many years he used to talk about uanuku, tamakana and tamahaki. I hadn't heard it. It was hard enough remembering our own taranaki stories. But he would carry on in a way that you know Boy Crib could. One of the things he did, and I want to acknowledge those who walked before us, who lit the ahika. And there was a story that was shared by Koro Mark Crib, what I'd like to share with you before we finish up. When our ancestors first set foot upon this land, they lit the fire, ahika, because the fire is a representation of our life principle. That fire is not just about physical warmth, it is our identity, our connection to the land, our wakapapa, and the essence of who we are as a people, no matter how much time has passed, no matter the challenges or the struggles, that fire continues to burn within us. There was a time when we were led away from our whenua, made to believe that it no longer belonged to us. But as Koro Mark reminds us, we do not have to fight to get it back because it never went anywhere. We were only directed away from it, and now we are returning. Now is the time to rebuild, to re-establish ourselves upon our whenua. Only on our own land can we truly stand on our mana, raise our ancestral houses, and shelter the mauri, the life force of our people. This is not about our war or conflict. It is about restoring balance, reclaiming what has always been ours, and ensuring our tamariki and our mokopuna inherit the strength of their tupuna. So let us walk forward with determination, guided by the wisdom of our past, carrying the fire of our ancestors into the future. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Ko Rimanakli.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Atamari, and welcome once again to all our whānau from our Te Korowai o Wainuiārua iwi, and welcome again to your house, to Parliament House, Harimai. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to begin with maybe a light note, if I may. And I noticed this morning when we were at the Porphyry at the Public Trust building that I seem to somehow get the memo that I'm wearing the colours of your iwi. And the reason why I say this light-hearted comment is I whakapapa to Lebanon. And what I realised when I started being embraced by our Māori brothers and sisters in South Auckland is that we've got a lot of similarities. And the first time I went to a tangi at Papakura Marae, the CEO over there, my friend Tony Kake, beautiful man, he was translating and explaining a lot of the tikanga that was taking place, and I was shocked to learn how similar Lebanese and Māori are in certain situations like tangi. And I noticed that after the formalities, there'd be some serious talk, and then there'd be some light-hearted comments. And it would go a bit back and forth. And what I realised is, like Lebanese, Māori grieve deeply. We wail, we cry, and we allow our souls and our families to cry together. But we allow for some humour, and maybe that's to dull some of the pain that we're feeling. And that's why I hope you don't mind that I said the light-hearted comment about the colour scheme. I saw this firsthand today, Mr. Speaker, at the Porphyry. And what I also learned from Tony Kake is the karanga and the beautiful women that sing that. What they're doing is they're calling upon those that have gone, the ancestors, the tupuna, and that that these tupuna, when we call them, when you call them, and thank you to the beautiful lady that sang today, that you're calling them and they're with us. And that's why for me, brothers and sisters, when that was explained to me that we're going to a state of tapu, I take it seriously. And I don't leave any pōwhiri without having a sip of water, because I take seriously what's important to you, our Māori brothers and sisters. And so today I kind of imagined, as we were sitting down and we were listening to many of our kaumātua and our ministers reflect on the kaupapa that we're here for today, I allowed myself to imagine that a number of those tupuna of yours were sitting on those empty seats and standing around. And I tried not to get emotional, and I think they really were there. And they're here right now as we're talking about what we're going forward with, the grievances that you collectively have suffered. And I'd like to reflect on some of those grievances, if I may, Mr. Speaker. It's important, and I know a number of us have reflected on it, but for those that have just tuned in from beyond our walls, there was warfare during the 19th century, led by the Crown in many situations, and these actions, they disrupted the social structure of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. There was land confiscation that we've heard of for public works. And we got some trains built, some railway built, but it was still on confiscated land. Mr. Speaker, there was the formation of national parks, the establishment of the Tongariro and Wanganui national parks. And this involved incorporation of ancestral lands without your consent, to those of you in the gallery, your ancestors, without consent or compensation. And when I realised this, Mr. Speaker, I thought about how beautiful the Tongariro crossing is and that national park. But it's so interesting. They're beautiful and they're breathtaking. But when you're eating an apricot that is so sweet, but it's stolen from a tree, that consumption is always underpinned with guilt. And that's what I realised what I thought of when I realised that these beautiful places are actually on confiscated land. There was socioeconomic and cultural impacts, cultural displacement, as we've heard of. And the loss of land and access to sacred sites, of course, disrupted your traditional practices. This is part of what we're acknowledging with the settlement bill today, Mr. Speaker. And it's important that we acknowledge it, and it's important that we try and find some type of resolution, which we really have tried with this process. Mr. Speaker, finally, I'd like to end with just a small quote from one of the submitters, Pieter Gilbert. And I hope you're here, and if not, I hope you're listening. And Pieter said, "Our settlement has come in God's timing, although it will never be enough considering all the loss many generations of our people have endured as a result of our lands being taken. We hope that through this settlement we can work together with the Crown, government agencies and community groups in achieving the bigger picture. Our settlement, as they said, has come in God's timing." God bless you as you go forward and create great opportunities for your mokopuna. I commend this bill to the House.
Call the Honourable Jenny Henderson.
O tēnā koe I te māngai o te whare. Kātangi te titi, kātangi te kāka, kātangi hoki ko ahau, te ihei mauri ora. Ko te mihi tuatahi ki te atua, nana nei ngā mea katoa. Ko te mihi tuaroa ki te whare e tū nei, tēnā koe. Apiti hono tātai hono, te honga mate ki te honga mate. Apiti hono tātai hono, te honga ora ki te honga ora. He mihi mahana kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Mr. Speaker, I would first like to acknowledge the fact that I was not able to come to your pōwhiri today, and I'm sorry for that. And I would also like to acknowledge that you were not able to be here for the second reading of this bill. I would like to acknowledge the fact that we're here today to right the wrongs of the past and acknowledge that for too long te iwi Māori have been required to conform into constructs that are not made for them. Yet still today, your reading and your legislation and the commemoration ceremonies for this legislation have overlapped. And so once again, Māori have been required to conform to fall into this form. So I would like to acknowledge that the speech I gave in the second reading when you were not here, I will be giving again now because I crafted this speech for you to hear. Te Korowai or Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill. This represents a milestone in a long and deeply painful journey towards justice for the people of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. This bill, when passed today, will give effect to the deed of settlement signed on the 29th of July 2023, settling the historical Treaty of Waitangi claims for Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. And in doing so, it acknowledges in law the immense injustices suffered by the iwi of Tamahaki, Tamakana, and Uenuku ke Manganui o te ao. And it also lays the future foundations for Te Korowai or Wainuiārua, so you can claim your rightful place as the kaitiaki of your whenua, awa and taonga. The grievances of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua are real. They are lived experiences that have shaped generations, experiences of war, dispossession, economic deprivation and cultural loss. These are grievances that echo through the centuries and continue to impact on whānau, hapu and iwi. Te Korowai or Wainuiārua have long occupied the central North Island and spanning an area over 600,000 hectares, including large parts of Whanganui and Tongariro National Parks, the Upper Whanganui River and National Park Township. Your lands are bordered by the rohe of 8 other iwi and also reflect the rich and interwoven histories of tangata whenua across your region. The story of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua over the past 2 centuries has been one of relentless pressure, forced conflict and systematic alienation from your whenua and your rights as tangata whenua. The first wound came in the form of war that forced ancestors of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua to conflict, sometimes with your own kin. The Crown's relentless military campaigns in Whanganui saw communities devastated, lands taken, and traditional structures of governance and authority shattered. The second wave of destruction came with the relentless march of Crown purchasing. The supposed agreements and transactions of the 19th century were often conducted in bad faith, with the Crown failing to uphold its promises set aside to protect tribal reserves. Instead, vast areas of land were alienated, leaving Te Korowai or Wainuiārua virtually landless. Public works takings then compounded this loss. Land was seized for hydroelectric projects, for railway construction, for defence purposes, always with little or even no regard for those who it affected the most, and the rights and the well-being of the people who called this land home. The construction of the North Island Main Trunk Railway is one example. It cut through the very heart of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua lands, yet iwi were left without benefit, without redress, and without whenua. Perhaps most wrongly, the large tracts of land were taken for the creation of Tongariro and Whanganui National Parks, parks that remain places of great natural beauty and cultural significance. Yet those parks were established without the consent of the very people that had cared for these lands for generations and generations. In effect, Te Korowai or Wainuiārua
were left strangers in their own whenua with the pressure of the Crown attempting to sever the connection of tūranga waiwai. And it is testimony today that you're here both in this House as members of Parliament and also in the gallery to stand defiant in the face of that force. The loss of land was devastating. The Crown's actions and omissions led to generations of social and economic deprivation. Without land, economic stability was impossible, and without economic stability, communities struggled. Poverty took root where prosperity should have flourished. Opportunities for advancement were few, and state policies only deepened that divide. Alongside the economic impact came the slow but deliberate erosion of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua's cultural and social structures. Along with that, the decline of te reo Māori, fragmentation of traditional governance, and the undermining of tribal identity, all resulted from the Crown's neglect and active suppression of Māori rights and culture. These losses are immeasurable. There is no settlement that can fully restore what has been taken. But today, through this bill, we acknowledge these injustices and we take a step towards reconciliation. This settlement provides a bill that is long overdue. The recognition at the highest level of the wrongs committed against Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. And it represents a promise that such injustices will never be repeated, even though this House is still considering the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill that is in Select Committee right now. This settlement has provided a range of redress, and it also contains a formal historical account of the injustices suffered by Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. In that acknowledgement, it includes the Crown's apology and acknowledgement. Words alone are not enough, but they are necessary. They mark the Crown's acceptance of its past failures and signal a commitment to a different future. But this is but a drop in the bucket of what has been lost and what has been taken. Part 2 of the bill provides statutory acknowledgements over 22 different areas and recognition over 13 sites. It provides overlay classifications that will restore the role of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua as kaitiaki over lands of deep cultural significance. And it changes place names, ensuring that stories of whenua are told in the language of its people. The vesting of 19 cultural redress properties, including 3 that will be jointly held with other iwi, and the inclusion of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua and the governance of Tongariro Taupo Conservation Board and the development of its conservation management strategy. That's called partnership, and it's also called co-governance. These provisions ensure that Te Korowai or Wainuiārua reclaim their rightful role as protectors of their land with a voice in the decisions that affect your rohe. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to conclude by saying that these are not handouts, this is not charity, this is a small portion of what was unjustly taken and returned to Te Korowai or Wainuiārua. I know that this will not anywhere near meet what has been lost, but I hope that this provides a strong foundation for you, for your tamariki, for your mokopuna in generations to come, and I wish you all the very best. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Mr. Speaker.
Sue's red mane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko rua pehu te monga, ko turakina te awa, no rangatike aho. Ko dosa redmayne, tuku wano, ko Sue's tuku ingoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. No mai haere mai ki te whare parimata. No mai ki tō koutou whare I tēnei rā. Welcome to your house today. I want to celebrate the coming together of the people of Tamahaki, Tamakana, and my people, Uanuku, the god of the rainbow. Uanuku tū wairua, A rainbow stands in two places. You are connected through shared experience, and today I am privileged to walk in your shoes, privileged to share your connection for the third reading of the Te Korowai or Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill. 185 years ago, rangatira from Te Korowai or Wainuiārua signed the Treaty of Waitangi with the expectation of fair treatment, justice and honour between Crown and iwi. But the good faith of your people was not matched by the Crown. Te Korowai or Wainuiārua persevered through land confiscation, unmet promises for the preservation of whenua Māori, and a complete lack of engagement on the developments and activities the Crown proceeded with on your land. You fiercely defended these actions by the Crown. Your people were drawn into conflict, fighting in battles that define New Zealand's history, such as those at Motua Island, Ohautahi and Pipariki Pā. It's important today to acknowledge the impact of the loss of your lands. Despite the strength of your people, by the 20th century you were virtually landless and forced to face the social and economic challenges which followed. Casualties of the Crown's actions included the loss of Mātauranga Māori due to discouragement of te reo Māori and the destruction of your tribal structures. Mr. Speaker, this bill acknowledges breaches of the Treaty of Waitangi, which literally left hapu and iwi landless and caused significant and ongoing social and economic harm. Aidan Gilbert, kia ora eho, has also talked to me about the symbolic division of the Whanganui River at Pipariki, with Whanganui to the south and the three hapu of Uanuku, Tamahaki and Tamakana to the north. Those to the north were labelled hoho, or rebels, by the Crown. He told me how they endured the stigma, the whakamā of the hoho label, and they endured the subsequent painful divisions between their iwi and the iwi of Whanganui. Although Tamahaki, Tamakana and Uanuku are distinct tribal entities, you are tightly connected through whakapapa and a shared history. In negotiations, you demonstrated mana akitanga as a people and as iwi. You've bound yourself together under a vision for collective prosperity. The outcomes of this settlement mark a starting point for redressing those harms. They're a springboard for hope and progress. I want to acknowledge the negotiators, Aidan Gilbert, Chris McKenzie, Paora Haitana, Uncle Baldy, and Steve Hidini, and the many others who supported them. You've navigated changing governments and hard conversations with neighbouring iwi. I commend you for your persistence and your patience. I also want to acknowledge those who aren't here to witness this special day. There have been many over the years who advocated tirelessly for recognition and redress. I pay tribute to Kaumatua and Kuia, who aren't here anymore, who also fought hard and were among the first to submit claims to the Waitangi Tribunal in the 1980s. Kua roa koutou e tātari ana. You have waited a long time. I want to congratulate the recently elected Board of Trustees for the Uanuku Charitable Trust. For Uanuku, Aidan Gilbert, Leslie Edmonds, Tafio McMaster. For Tamahaki, Paora Haitana, Wayne Cribb, Greg Robinson. And for Tamakana, Hayden Tūroa, Marilyn Davis and James Foster. This election was historic, and I wish you all the best for your efforts to build a prosperous future for the benefit of our region and all its people. As the proud MP for Rangatike, I'm excited about what this settlement means for you and for our region. I enjoyed a candid conversation with Elijah Puhi just the other day. We talked about the much needed shot in the arm, as he described it, that the settlement will bring to Waimarino. At a time when we most need it, following the mill closure and the harsh economic realities, we also talked about the political environment peddling division. Well, Mr. Speaker, this bill signifies the opposite. As Elijah reiterated, this is the start of new beginnings, a time to focus on shared commonalities, to focus on what brings us together, not what divides us. The health and well-being of our people, the health and well-being of the environment, of our communities of interest. This bill signifies the end of a long and tumultuous claim period. What comes across so strongly is a shared desire and a steely determination to make the settlement work for everyone. There are green shoots. The Trust is already starting to do great things, and I look forward to seeing this shared vision of Te Korowai or Wainuiārua come to fruition. Initiatives like the Raitahi Community Hub and the Pōkaka Eco Sanctuary give us just a glimpse into what the future might hold. Uanuku to Wairua, a rainbow stands in two places. To the people of Uanuku, Tamahaki and Tamakana, you are connected through shared experience. And today, in this House, we are all connected to you. Mr. Speaker, it's my privilege to commend the bill to the House. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Glenn Bennett.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker, and
5-minute call.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, and I bring warm taranaki greetings to you this morning from my whānau to yours. And we have a shared history, and you know, a love story. Didn't go quite so well for us, but that's okay. You benefit from the Wanganui awa, and I say thank you for allowing us to, from your story of love, have our beautiful taranaki maunga watching over my people and the lands that I live in. To those who have gone before you and weren't able to, those who together. And we have to acknowledge our past to look forward to our future. And we look at the warfare. We look at martial law on your lands. We look at the confiscation. We look at what was taken in terms of your awa. For what? For some roads, for some rail, for some electricity, for some tanks and warfare. For the main trunk line. And like most iwi and hapu around Aotearoa, it's your resources, it's your lands that forged a pathway for my people to build our towns and our cities. It was your forests that were cut down to build our schools and our houses and our main streets. It was your lands that were taken for the sake of transporting the goods and my people to the places we wanted to go, to heat our homes, to run our factories, to build profit and prosperity, and leaving your people behind, landless, and in many ways resources taken off them. But I take great comfort is the wrong word, I apologise, but in the mana that I see, not only today, but in the fight that has gone on for more than 140 years for your lands and your resources. And Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge those who have come before, but I look forward to seeing those who are yet to come, your tamariki, and your tamariki to come. And I look forward to today being a pivotal day, not of settlement, but of some kind of redress that will see a thriving and inclusive community, iwi hapu, that show my people in Aotearoa what the future holds, honouring te tiriti and walking together. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Te whare.
Greg Fleming.
Ki ngā iwi he toru o Te Korowai o Wainuiārua, tamahaki tamakana uanuku. Nōku te honorei, nōku te whiwhi, nōku te tino maringa nui, te tū ki tō koutou aro. Kia tautoko ai te pānui tuatoru o tēnei piri. Can I just start by acknowledging the previous speaker's point? I loved the way that he moved away from the language of settlement and towards one of hope and a promise. This is indeed, of course, a settlement, but it's for that purpose. I had a speech written for this occasion, of course. I finished it last night, but then this morning I went to the mihi whakatau. We've heard a number of critiques this morning of the process of this House, both here and generally, and the suggestion and the call made that you all needed more time in this place. I didn't hear you ask for that this morning. Rather, I heard you inviting us to your place. It was my privilege to sit on the Māori Affairs Select Committee, and I was so sorry that we didn't get the opportunity with the cancellation, with the tangi that came up, and that we weren't able to reorganise. And I apologise for that. I won't let that happen again in the future. I will move heaven and hell to make sure that with any iwi with whom we are going through a process like this that we get in front of. Because hearing you this morning, ko te whakamomona o te maramatanga. Can I acknowledge just two of the speakers in particular, to Hayden Turua, a tāhua tō kōrero i te atanei hoa. Kua rangona au tō wero, kua hinatori ai nei. Your challenge about the disconnect of much of this city was for me further emphasised when moments later I had to miss the hākari to race back here because this House demanded my place, demanded my presence at 9 a.m. and not a second later. He kupu whakarite ne. And te paura haitana. Nau I whakatau te wairua ma te karakia, ma te waiata ki te atua o tō tātou whakapono. I a koe e kōrero ana ki tō koutou tūpuna e kākahu tia o kupu e te tangi o te mokopuna, a hunter crib. For me, the most powerful moment this morning, and it's the picture that will stay with me for as long as I am graced with years on this earth, was when you were speaking to your tūpuna and speaking to them about where we had come and where you were and where we were this day. And Hunter's cries were dressing your words. That picture from Hunter through his dad Gordon to his ancestors, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I think you'll have had to listen to about 20,000 by the time you finish here today. That's the picture that will summarise it all for me. I can't wait to meet Hunter again a few years from now and Uri of this moment. For the bill that we passed today recognises that Te Korowai o Wainuiārua has suffered greatly through incredible land loss, through social and economic deprivation, through the decline of te reo Māori, te tino taonga, tuku iho no ngā tūpuna, and the fragmentation of your tribal structures. The intent, the purpose, the hope of this moment, and what I heard you yearn for this morning, is that Hunter will mature and grow on the land of his ancestors, that land will flourish and thrive, and that hunter fluent in te reo takitaki, te reo o te whenua, te reo o te rangi, te reo o ona tūpuna, will spend his days strengthening the ties of his iwi and hapu. Koira te tino tūmanako, koira te take o tēnei piri, koira te tino wawata o tēnei whare, koira tō koutou wawata. E te manga te whare, I commend this bill to the House.
The Right Honourable Adrian Rafe.
Tuatahi tika ana kia huri atu kia koutou ngā iwi e toru nei, tamahaki, tamakana, uenuku ki manganui o te ao nā tū kaihoro. Tēnei ahau e whakapiri ana aku mihi ki ngā mihi tino fresh ana ngā rangatira nei a pēni henare tama pōtaka. Tai atu ki te whakamoimiti e tuku atu te mokopuna o a pōtoro paura heke nui ara ko takutai Tash Kemp. Tai atu anō ki te ngā whakatauki e whakahua ana a Debbie Ngārewa Peka. Tai atu anō ki te karanga o Huhana Linden. Kia koutou tai atu anō ki ngā mihi katoa o te whare nei. Tēnei ahau tuku mihi atu ki a koutou. Nau mai, haere mai, tēnā koutou, o tira, tēnā tātou. Mr. Speaker, it's an honour to stand in the House today to acknowledge this bill and the third reading of this bill. I remember I accompanied the Honourable Andrew Little on his first visit to Wainuiārua, where he was told about the vision that the people had. We heard a lot of kōrero about what has materialised in this bill. And I'm thankful that we have arrived to this day to see its fruition. A lot of work has gone into getting to this point, and I, like others in the House, I acknowledge the leadership and tenacity of Te Rangatira Taku Tuakana Aidan Gilbert, o tira tōna tīma katoa, I mahia e nei mahi. We all know it's not an easy task. Made more difficult by the hurdles and barriers that iwi go through to get a settlement. To be the referee amongst overlapping claimants with other iwi, to deal with the perpetrator of the breaches of the treaty and who is also the decision maker about whether or not you get a settlement. It takes huge amounts of determination to get to this point, and I acknowledge it, and as we all should. We've heard a lot of kōrero, most of it really good in this whare on this debate. Some of it a little bit disconnected, however, good intent there. One should never forget the breaches, and yes, should move on for the future generations. But let me tell you, in this bill, there's an apology. I always say that apologies are only worth anything if the perpetrator never again perpetrates. And whilst we are passing this bill in its third reading, there are other actions that this House is considering, which will directly impact on all three iwi in this settlement. So I take it with a little bit of a grain of salt when someone says move on. Probably because I'm a whanaunga of yours. And so when I'm hearing that, I'm not hearing it as a member across the other side of the house. I'm hearing it as a uri. And I'm considering it in that context. And I just hope and I challenge this house to never again trample on the mana of these iwi, ever. And that when the return of certain bills arrive back into this house, they take that on board. I want to take the opportunity I'm not going to speak for too long, but I do want to speak directly to the next generations. Your mātua, your kraua, your kuia have done this today. And they have done this for your future. And they have done the best under this construct that they could do, that it allowed them to do. One day in the future, I know you will return to this house. You kind of have an obligation to do that. And don't look at it as trampling on the mana of what your mātua and your tūpuna have done. No. Look at it as challenging whether or not things like relativity to other claims has been achieved. Whether or not this is in fact full and final, because it can only be full and final or assessed to be so after all settlements have been done. So there is work for you to do in the future e ngā rangatai. You should be proud today of your iwi. I certainly am. I just want to, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to finish there with, I don't usually do this, but I'm going to do it today. Korori hari rue ki a koe, I hoa ngā manoa. Tua uri uri whai o ki tōna te rangi me te whenua, te nui o tō kororia. Ana i mātou, tono atu ki a koutou ki ho mai piki te ora, piki te kaha, piki te maramatanga me te rangi mārie. Kia manaaki tia hoki e nei iwi e toru a tamahaki tamakana, ue nuku ki manganui o te ao nā tū kaihoro. Manaaki tia ona a rātou tamariki mokopona me te huarai I mua I a rātou, nō reira koutou nau hoki te tīmatanga me te whakaotinga mai o mātou tumanako atu nei I roto o koutou kororiatanga ko te maanga e tautoko mai, ai nei, ake nei, ai.
Carl Bates. Ina mana, ina reo, ina iwi, tēnā koutou. Ki ngā mata, haere atu rā, kia tātou katoa, tēnā tātou. Many of us enjoyed the Miki Whakatau this morning, and I rise to speak as the last speaker in the third reading on the settlement bill. As today we take another important step towards settlement for Te Korowai o Wainuiārua. This is a moment that has been a long time coming, one that has taken years of hard work, dedication and persistence from many people. In my first reading speech, I acknowledged that indeed in my context, this has been what you would call a lifetime of work for many people. I know that some of what I'm going to say today will be repetitive as the 12th speaker for those of you in the gallery, but hopefully I'm going to add something new to the korero this morning. I want to start by acknowledging those who have fought for this settlement, both past and present. In particular, I want to acknowledge how so many of those who began this journey in the 1980s are not with us any longer as we complete this part. To the negotiators, the kamatua, the legal teams and the whānau who have given their time and energy to get to this point. It has been a hard road, and today is part of recognising that mahi. The history behind this claim is hard to hear, but it needs to be acknowledged. The people of Unuku, Tamakana and Tamahaki have suffered through war and through decisions of the Crown that left them with almost nothing. The label of rebels has stuck with them for generations, causing not only harm to their land holdings, but to their identity and to their future opportunities. The impact of that loss was not just economic. It was cultural, it was social, and it was personal. When you take land, when you take whenua, you take away a community's ability to determine its own future. That is what happened here. A critical part of the settlement is the Crown's formal apology. Words alone cannot undo the past, yet they matter. They acknowledge what happened and who was responsible. They acknowledge the hurt caused, and hopefully they enable both iwi and the Crown to reorientate to the future. This settlement also, as we know, includes financial and cultural redress. The $21.7 million is an acknowledgement of the damage done. Not a replacement for what was lost, but a foundation to help rebuild. The $6.85 million in Cultural Revitalisation Fund will support the strengthening of language, traditions and history for future generations, for your mokopuna and for all of your uri. Then there is also the return of 19 sites. These are not just parcels of land, they hold deep significance. They are places of whakapapa, places of connection, places that tell the story of all these three iwi. Over the past few days, I've taken some time to look at topographical maps of the rohi and where these sites are. It really reinforced how much was lost and why this redress matters. If you've not ever looked at a topographical map of the area, take some time to do so. Some of the places in the settlement are right beside the Wanganui River, like Ramanui, where one of the hapu recently journeyed down the Awa, reconnecting with their whenua. That's what the settlement is about, not just looking back, but creating opportunities for people to reconnect to what was taken. I asked Don Robertson about his journey and what he wanted me to say in this house today. He said, I started the grievance process in 1983, literally the year I was born, which at times has been a long and painful journey. A lot of people who started with me have now passed. A few weeks ago, my whānau paddled down the Awa and I was able to stand there with my 85-year-old brother and 80-year-old sister, and in anticipation of tomorrow, today, recount our process with our wider whānau. Atahui, beautiful. The settlement also recognises the role of these iwi as kaitiaki of their whenua. That's an important step, particularly in relation to Wanganui and Tongariro National Parks. The ability to be involved in protecting and managing these areas is vital. The establishment of the of Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Trust is another key part of the settlement. Already seeing more engagement from whānau. Membership in 2024 had increased by 11%, which showed that people are seeing the opportunities that the settlement creates. We are also seeing that in the strategic projects already underway, mentioned by my fellow member, the MP for Rangitikei, these initiatives are about investing in the future, creating opportunities and ensuring that this settlement leads to long-term benefits. There will also be some passing of the rākau to the next generation to lead through the next part of your story. Some people might ask, why are we still doing this? The answer is simple. Because justice matters. Because when something was done wrong, it should be put right. This is not a handout. It is a recognition of harm, an effort to restore what was lost, and a way to ensure these iwi have the means to determine their own future. When iwi are strong, their communities are strong. When the past is acknowledged, we can move forward properly. This settlement will not fix everything, but it is a step in the right direction. It is an honour and a privilege to stand here and to be the final member to commend this bill to the House. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Te Korowai o Wainuiārua Claims Settlement Bill, third reading.
I understand that there is a request for a waiata. Congratulations to all involved.
Members, I call on Government Order of the Day number 8.
District Court Judges Amendment Bill, third reading.
Speaker.
I call the Honourable Paul Goldsmith.
I present a legislative statement on the District Court Judges Amendment Bill.
That legislative statement is published under the authority of the House and can be found on the Parliament website. Honourable Paul Goldsmith.
Madam Speaker, I move that the District Court Amendment Bill be now read a third time. This bill supports the implementation of the Sentencing Reform Amendment Bill, which is central to the delivering on the government's objective to restore law and order and to restore real consequences for crime. And so the sentencing bill is around reducing the ability of judges to massively reduce sentences through a series of discounts and limiting that. And one of the consequences of that legislation is that there will be more pressure on the courts. We're very conscious also of the fact that many New Zealanders are waiting too long to achieve justice through the court processes. There have been very long delays in the courts. It got particularly worse over COVID. And frankly got worse over the last few years, and so as a government we're very determined to do many things to speed up the processes of the courts. And this bill will help alleviate pressure to a modest degree. It amends the District Court Act 2016 to increase the statutory maximum of District Court judges by one, and increase from 182 to 183 full-time equivalent judges. And I don't think there's much need to go into the detail much further than that, other than to say that this government is committed to restoring law and order in this country. We are bringing in a raft of changes to toughen consequences for particularly serious repeat offenders. That's not the only focus of our justice policy. We're also very much interested in ensuring that prisoners get access to rehabilitation programs, which is why we've allowed for that to happen for remand prisoners. And we're also focused on dealing with some of the long-term causes of crime, such as making sure that kids actually go to school, which is a useful thing and one of the most important things that can help deal with youth crime and the funnel of justice that we've inherited. So there's much going on in this space, and it's good to see widespread support for this legislation in the House, and I commend it to the House. Thank you.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the Honourable Dr Duncan Webb.
Madam Speaker, thank you. So, what an extraordinary speech from the Minister of Justice, and the temerity of saying he thinks he's doing well in reducing crime by sending kids to school and feeding them the rubbish that government is providing to them. The only reason this bill is needed is because this government wants to put more people in jail. That is their only justice policy. It's a provenly wrong and failed policy, and we have things like boot camps contributing to the problem.
So, yes, we support this bill because we do need faster and more effective justice, but the only justice that those people are delivering is putting people in jail. And they've seen the backlogs in the court and they have made zero progress to date. And I make a prediction that this will make no difference whatsoever, and they will continue to go behind on access to justice. Remand populations in our prison will increase because of the failed policies like arresting people because of what they're wearing. Now, this absolutely ridiculous policies. There is a problem of law and order in our society, and we need to address it. But if the idea of that putting people in jail for longer, taking away discretions from judges in sentencing decisions, not giving discounts for youth and remorse, the idea that in some way that's going to solve the problem is just a failed policy which goes against advice, it goes against evidence, and it goes against common sense. So yes, you'll get our vote for this trivial little bill, but in terms of your wider justice policies, it's time to wake up.
I call Lawrence Zunan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise on behalf of the Green Party in support of the District Court Judges Amendment Bill. However, Madam Speaker, there are a number of things that I would like to address. Now, I think, Madam Speaker, it is appropriate for us to start by just sort of providing some context around the committee stage of this bill. Madam Speaker, the bill itself is not controversial. It is to increase the maximum number of district court judges from 182 to 183 full-time equivalent. And this comes as a part of the package of the Sentencing Reform Amendment Bill as well. But, Madam Speaker, going to the committee stage, there were a number of questions that we asked the minister during the committee stage that were not responded or articulated with a response. And I think most importantly, one of the things that we have asked during the committee stage is where would they anticipate the judge to go? And how would that then be divided? Are we looking at part-time judges in multiple locations because it is, well, moving up by one in terms of full-time equivalent as opposed to, and that could mean, 5 judges in different locations at 0.2 additional to that. Where are the judges, what court are the judges going? Because one of the things that the minister did highlight during the committee stage is that the district court don't just cover district court, but also covers family court as well, and as well as youth court. The lack of response that we were given during the committee stage, Madam Speaker, is a bit of a concern. Because the whole time the minister is talking about the policy intent behind it and the fact that the official information given is that they will need to have one increase. And we have mentioned it in previous speeches in the House as well, that the last time there was this the number of district court judges was increased was in 2019, where it was increased from 165 to 182. But this time round, the advice we're given was just one, but without clearly articulating where that judge may be going, or even which court that they may be going. Understandably, Madam Speaker, that when we were looking at Section 12, this is Clause 4 of this particular bill, when we're looking at the accompanying or the principal act that this is amending, which is the District Court Act 2016, Section 11 of that particular act talks about the appointment of the judge. And I 100% agree with the minister during the committee stage that when we are looking at the appointment itself, that has a level of independence, as we see with the principle of comity, that the appointment of our judges are done independently. However, Madam Speaker, in this case, for for the government to actually say that only one judge is needed, there must be some level of understanding or some level of conversation that they've had with the judiciary system on where that's going to go. Otherwise, how could anyone so confidently say, all we need is one more district court judge at FTE? So that is the kind of clarity, Madam Speaker, that we did not receive during the committee stage. And I think that is something that must be highlighted as part of the third reading. Madam Speaker, the other thing that we have heard during the committee stage from the Minister is the broader sort of, I guess, justice reform that we are seeing in this space. And one of the things that the Minister specifically mentioned during the committee stage is about that we have more things coming and there are more policies that we are looking at. And again, something like this in terms of the number of district court judges cannot be discussed or cannot be decided in silo in terms of the broader context of some of the policies that the Minister mentioned during the committee stage. Because I think, Madam Speaker, when we are looking at the reason that this bill was split in the first reading into the two separate assessment processes or scrutiny processes through the Select Committee stage and second reading and committee stage, aside from the Sentencing Reform Amendment Bill, is the fact that it's supposed to be a response to the Sentencing Reform Amendment Bill. However, as we're currently going through the committee stage for that particular bill, there are a number of issues that are really, really important that potentially will tie into this particular bill and whether this bill itself provides the support and the access and the resources and also the availability and the possibility to mitigate some of that backlog. I don't know if the accompanying bill and this bill will actually do what is needed in the Sentencing Reform Amendment Bill, Madam Speaker. Overall, yes, having one additional judges, love it, it's great. We would like to see more, as many of the submitters have mentioned. They think that one isn't going far enough, that in order for us to really address the backlog, we need to look at more. But again, within the court hierarchy, Madam Speaker, that this is just one aspect of the court. We're also looking at a lot of the work that needs to be done from a high court, from a court of appeal, and also from the Supreme Court perspective. One of the things that is particularly important and I want to highlight as part of this is the fact that one of the things that has introduced in the other bill, again, coming back to the reason why this bill even exists in the first place is because of the Sentencing Reform Amendment Bill. One of the things that was introduced in the other bill is around the increase or addition of aggravating factors. And the particular aspect that I want to hone in on is the inclusion of Section 66(1)(b), C, and D of the Crimes Act 1961, particularly around party liability. Madam Speaker, that is something that is incredibly complex and is something that in many, many cases has gone all the way up to the Supreme Court if we're looking at the case of Arson and Quinn in 2014. So for us to look at this particular bill and the number of district court judges and just increasing the district court judge number from 182 to 183 creates a broader problem of the bottleneck effect we may potentially see in the higher courts as a result of the changes to the other piece of legislation. So with that, Madam Speaker, you see that, that if we do have the increase of one judge FTE across the board, and we're seeing that being done, and we're seeing that then going through to sort of the next year, and we're seeing that actually then it means that, yes, maybe at the district court level, we are seeing that maybe this will mitigate some of the issues and address some of the concerns. But once we get to the higher courts, like the High Court, Court of Appeal, and Supreme Court, we are stuck with the same concern that and the same issue and the same backlog created as a result of the Sentencing Reform Amendment Bill. So again, with that and the committee stage, the question then still remains on why are we only increasing the number of district court judges from one, or just to one, and not looking at other potential court judges. I will say that I agree with what the Minister is saying is that when you are appointing a judge, it is permanent. There is a level of tenure, and you can't really just easily go back without reintroducing it into another primary legislation of bringing the number of district court judges down. But at the same time, what we're seeing, and in terms of some of the other reports that I asked the Minister during the committee stage around the latest report in 2022 for improving access to civil justice, and particularly in paragraph 40 of that report, talks about that, we are looking at a decline of the district court civil jurisdiction in response to the fact that district court judges simply cannot handle, and the district courts in general simply cannot handle the workload that is there. So when we do have some of these evidence and some of these reports that we are seeing, it still remains why we are only increasing the number of judges by 1, even though in 2019 we increased it by not 165 to 182, but in fact 160 to 182 by 22 district court judges. So all of these sort of combined together, it does beg the question of what is the ultimate policy goal, because we can't look at bills, and particularly when you look at the judiciary system, we can't look at it in silo. And I think one of the things I would really like to address as sort of the finishing remark for this, Madam Speaker, is as we are looking at the district court judges and the number of district court judges and the way that we are appointing district court judges, it must also be said that we are entering a new phase where our judges don't necessarily reflect the cultural diversity and also the diversity that we are seeing in Aotearoa. And I think it's particularly pertinent when we're looking at the company bill, the sentencing reform amendment bill, where we will potentially has the possibility, like I mentioned, with the introduction of party liability as an aggravating factor of increasing and further punishing Māori, but also women in general and Wahine Māori. Madam Speaker, we are seeing that Wahine Māori already make up 63% of the prison population. So I think when we look at this bill, we support it, but we do think it can go a lot further. Thank you.
I call the Honourable the Honourable Karen Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a relatively simple bill, increasing district court judges by 1 from 182 to 183 full-time equivalents. And this is actually really important that we're acknowledging that the workload within the district courts over the last few years has increased quite significantly. And we have been appointing more judges to meet this increased workload, but it has meant that we have reached the maximum number and we need to increase that by 1. Whilst this government is very focused on the victims out in our communities of crime, we also have to acknowledge that when we're in the process of accountability for those who are perpetrating those crimes, that the justice must be delivered in a timely manner. And justice delayed is justice denied. And so we have to make sure we find that balance of making sure that going through our court system, that it is done in an appropriate way. But I, as a Minister for Children, with reforms around youth crime and lowering the amount of victims within the community, and saying that there must be accountability for those crimes, and we must be making sure that our communities are safe. In that process, yes, there will be more pressure on the courts, but this is part of taking accountability for the crimes that have been committed within our communities, and making sure that there is justice for the victims of those crimes. So I really support this bill, making sure that our justice system moves faster, but I also will not apologise for our government's focus on victims in our communities and making sure that there's accountability for those crimes.
Jamie Arbuckle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to support this bill in its third reading, the District Court Judges Amendment Bill. Madam Speaker, this bill is common sense action again from this government that increases the statutory number of district court judges by 1, lifting the number from 182 to 183, and it's quite that simple. This will help the district court run smoothly, especially to support the government's action on crime through the sentencing reform and amendment bill. We acknowledge that there are long delays in our justice system that needs to be addressed, and this government is also addressing that issue and those concerns in various other reforms. And those reforms are through court technology and modern case management systems. New Zealand First, we are eager to see this bill achieve royal assent, and New Zealand First is pleased to support a bill which is part of this government's work on law and order. We look forward to further action, reducing wait times and delivering effective justice for New Zealanders. On that, Madam Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
I call Takutai Ferris.
Kia ora. Hei timatanga māku, kariro māku ngā whakaroa te Pāti Māori e whakapuaki mo te pire kia nei ko the District Court Amendment Bill. Engari hei timatanga māku ka mihi atu rā ki te hunga kātahi anō ka wehe i te whare. Ara ki Te Korowai o Wainuiārua, o Uenuku, o Tamahaki, o Tamakana, me tā rātou whakatau i tā rātou kreme tuatahi me te krauna. Hoki rawa mai ki tēnei pire me tōna whai pānga kia o Uenuku, kia Tamakana, kia Tamahaki, me te whānui, te horapatanga o te iwi Māori. Enei mea, ngā pire o tēnei whare, e kore e noho takakau noa. Ka whai pānga ki tēnā pire, ki tēnā pire, ki tēnā whare, ki tēnā whare, ki tēnā iwi, ki tēnā iwi. Koia te pūtake o aku kōrero. Kei tā rua tia, toru tia, whātia ngā kōrero kua tūna ke e te whare. Nō reira, ka hoki au ki te reo Pākehā e horapa i te māramatanga. So just in beginning, e te pika, I would just like to acknowledge the whānau who were just here only moments ago, a few minutes ago, Te Korowai o Wainuiārua, and their hapu that they represent, their iwi that they represent, Uenuku, Tamakana and Tamahaki. And I want to just say to the House that bills don't exist in isolation, but I see the behaviour of the House promotes the idea. Iwi come to this House seeking a face-to-face discussion with the Crown to discuss the impacts of the many bills of the Crown on those iwi, and this bill is one of them. It may seem insignificant in nature, increasing the amount of district court judges from 182 to 183. Doesn't seem like much, but when you consider it in an ecosystem of bills, in an ecosystem of ministries of the House, it maintains the settings, the societal settings that have been produced out of the behaviour that the Crown just apologised for. So they are indeed connected. They are connected in every way, and we shouldn't just brush them aside as some small bill with not much influence. So bills do not exist in isolation, e te pika. Madam Speaker, that's my point. And despite the fact that this is a relatively simple bill with a relatively simple outcome, it still has a large impact, particularly when you consider the raft of justice legislation being promoted by this government. A raft of legislation that, as described by the Minister's own ministry, is likely to double the prison population in New Zealand over a short period of time. What we know about that is that the current one is about 10,000. So if you double it, there'll be another 10,000, half of them will be Māori. That's the connection of one piece of legislation to the next. That's the connection of one piece of legislation to the next. 100 years of experience tells us this. Quite easy. I thought you fellas were onto it. So bills do not exist in isolation. And I see that the decorum of the House has rapidly regressed from 15 minutes ago when the government were here apologising for appalling behaviour. And now you want to drag us back down into it. Mr. Bates, who gave the last speech to Uenuku, to Tamakana And Tamahaki, here you are running the kōrero again. Oh, back to the bill. My colleagues on this side don't understand how I connect everything to the bill, but that's okay. They'll catch up at some point in the future. But I think someone said it today. They said, apologies mean nothing when the behaviour continues. So I see the behaviour continuing. Your apologies mean nothing. And, maybe we could just consider listening. Oh, I think the Minister for the South Island should be more worried about getting ferries for them. Hoi anō e te pika ka hoki kia koe ko tāku e mea nei. The point of my speech is that bills do not exist in isolation. Kia ora tātou.
I call Ricardo Menendez-Matt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think it's really important to hammer the point out. This bill, as simple as it may sound, as has said by others, does not exist in isolation in terms of a political agenda that will actually see our judicial system overloaded by other bills that are actually that do not have an evidential basis. Other bills that actually will put pressure on the judiciary that will not address actually the core drivers of issues like violence, and that will actually criminalise Māori, low-income people, disabled people, and many other groups that have already been failed. I think to me what was really telling is that the bill was described by members of the government as a common sense bill, but as my colleague Lawrence already explained at the committee of the whole House, actually there was little common sense explained by the minister when it came to justifying why the increase of district court judges just by one, because at the end of the day, this is a country that is seeing a population increase, that is seeing a political agenda by this government to double our prison population, and one that actually is not, despite all the bumper sticker comments from the government side, is not centred on supporting victims. Because actually, if they follow the evidence on what are some of the best ways to support victims, yes, sure, supporting and resourcing the judiciary is one way. But when you already have people who work at the front lines telling this government that some of their other reforms that relate to this will actually lead to victims being potentially worse off. For example, when it comes to issues around retail crime, I think it reeks of a disconnection with the evidence in relationship to what else they are proposing. When we have already victims that have low incomes, unable to adequately access things like legal aid, it really tells us that actually this isn't a government that is genuinely centred and focused on supporting victims who face violence. When we have a government that is not actually supporting, for example, providing adequate income support to people needing to leave issues of family violence, that tells us that this is not a government genuinely supportive of victims. This bill in and of itself, yes, will go a small way towards increasing access to justice. But I think it needs to be said that what kind of justice this government is seeking to actually achieve. Because as a previous speaker noted, we've seen the rapid shift in rhetoric and approach when a tiny bit of, not even full justice being delivered in the previous bill, now is kind of turned upside down when it comes to making a mockery of the person. I think we deserve better than, high-level rhetoric statements that, this bill is common sense when the evidential basis for it is not actually being presented to us, not at the committee of the whole House stage, not by the government side, as to exactly, the justification as to why we're only seeing an increase in district court judges by one. And I think we also deserve a robust analysis and commentary from the House, from the government side at least, as to, for example, which populations are likely most served by the current makeup of the judiciary and why this justifies increasing it just by one. Finally, I think I want to touch on the realities that actually when we have a government that is doing a lot of other harm in other spaces, whether it's on the environment, inequality, etc. I actually think I'd rather be spending time off this House debating something like this, because actually in isolation this won't cause harm. And if time is going to be spent on things like this, that are not going to directly result in our communities being harmed compared to other pieces of legislation, then let's do so. Because actually, I'd rather be standing here right now debating a very, very, very small reform than actually enabling the government to push forward pieces of legislation that attack Te Tiriti, the environment, people living in low-income communities. So I invite the government to bring forward as many primary pieces of legislation they have to increase the number of district court judges one at a time, so that perhaps this is all we do this term.
Carl Bates.
Madam Speaker, this is a very clear illustration of the difference in perspectives from that side of the House to this side of the House. Over here, we believe if you do the crime, you do the time. If you do the crime, you go into prison where you should be. And you need district court judges to make that happen. Over there, let's be very clear, Madam Speaker, you are hearing what's going to happen should they ever get, God help us, should they ever get back to the Treasury benches. They're going to open the gates of the prisons and let people out. Because they don't believe that if you go and do something wrong, you should go into jail. Because they don't say, Madam Speaker, they don't say that actually it's logical. There is stuff been happening. We need to put people through the court process, and you need a judge for that process. Pretty common sense, pretty basic. They'll catch up eventually, Madam Speaker. It is important that we ensure that this bill goes through the process so that we can have the district court judges in place to do what New Zealanders want in this country, and that is the restoration of law and order. That's what they wanted, that's what they voted for, and that is what this government has been delivering. As much as they want to hoot and toot and puff and huff, Madam Speaker, you got two options here. Or you don't, the country does. They can either have a government that ensures law and order, or they can have a bunch of the opposition. I won't use anything too colourful to describe them in case I get in trouble. And this korero is all about not getting in trouble and ensuring that those that do feel the consequences, Madam Speaker. So the alternative is a bunch of the opposition who literally want to unlock the gates and let people out of prison because they have us on when the prison numbers go up, because we've actually held people accountable, Madam Speaker. That is what New Zealand wants. This bill helps ensure that happens in a very practical, common sense way. And Madam Speaker, I commend it to the House.
Thank you so much, Carl. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Greg O'Connor.
Sense.
Oh, that life were that simple. It would be so easy if we could do, and look at what's happening at the moment in America. You've got a man who aspires, who arrives, and this is a good idea, let's just do it. And we know this could take about 5 years to actually fix some of that damage. Listen to what Mr. Takuta Ferris said. Right. Everything is joined up. Now, this is a very simple bill, Madam Speaker. It is just about increasing the number of district court judges. Now, what I'd invite those opposite to do is to reflect on what the role of a district court judge is. He or she is a part of a much bigger ecosystem. By the time a set of facts arrive before a district court judge, there are so many component parts that have got there. And so that judge is actually a really important part of the decision making. And I'd also invite those opposite to have a look at another piece of legislation which has been oft referred to in relation to this, where we are actually going to be purely prescribing outcomes. Well, we might as well get AI to do it, because we're going to end up by we put these highly qualified people, some have been very good lawyers, some have been very good commercial lawyers, some have been very good prosecutors. We're going to put them in the chair and say, tick this box. Now, as a young police officer starting, And there's a lot of, I know, old ex-cops who are on all sorts of websites who will be sitting listening to this at the moment because they tend to like to listen to any piece of legislation that is around law and order. And each one of them will be sitting talking about old district court judges that they knew, old characters. We in Wellington, we had Ben Scully. Now, Ben Scully was that judge when you had your first not guilty, when you were appearing. Ben was a character. But the important thing with Ben is that you went in and you weren't dressed properly, you would get a dressing down, as would the lawyers, as were the defendants. So they were actually an integral part of things. So when we are actually considering this legislation, and particularly other legislation, as Mr Ferris has quite rightly pointed out, everything is joined up. Just what I'd invite you to do is to ensure that you do have an understanding of the broader ecosystem. Now, some of you, Mr Meager, I know that you've stood in the district court, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. That if you just break the district court judge's role down to its component part, which actually the legislation which is coming next is endeavouring to do, then you're going to lose an important part of justice, because those district court judges, guys like Sir David Carruthers, who went on to become the IPCA, when they sat there, they could actually join bits up because they were also seeing the same defendants coming through week after week, month after month. Now, that might be as simple as saying, you've got some old drunk, winter's coming on, I'll give him 6 months so he can go and dry himself out, give him 6 months at Mount Crawford and he'll come out. We know he'll probably start again. But that judge actually had the ability to look and understand that everything was going on. So yes, we'll have another judge here, we could have another 5 judges, but unless we fully understand what the role of those judges is, and if in doing so we're completely disempowering them, we're completely taking any judgment out of the judges, we might as well change their name. In fact, we used to call them magistrates. I'm one of those old-fashioned guys. I thought magistrate had a little bit more of a really sort of mythology around it than just judges. I think we did that at about 1980, and a lot of the old characters I'm talking about were magistrates. I'm not standing here, Madam Speaker, saying let's go back and call them magistrates. But what I would like to say, and I'll leave the opposition with this, is they're going to be looking at different legislation. When you're sitting around, you're going to be in your caucuses and someone will bring another piece of legislation. This is going to solve everything. This is going to solve everything, common cold, right the whole way through if we just pass this. But what I'd invite those opposite to do is just give a bit of thought. And those that have stood in the district court, those that have been part of the justice system, just think, okay, is this Trumpian? Is this make a sort of a Trumpian type arrangement around justice and it's going to fix everything? Well, it won't. Any more than those judges who will sit there. Give them the opportunity to actually join the dots up themselves. Again, as Mr Ferris said, just try and take a little bit of a holistic view. Yes, there are people who should never see the light of day. There are people, and I'll be the first to say, and they're relatively easy to identify. Make sure those people do their time and stay in there. But also be very careful that you have a system that those people almost become obscured by a wave of people who the justice system have probably failed. And again, I'll tell you what, and I'll go back, Mr Meager, because you're standing in front of me, having been a lawyer, you know full well you've made submissions for people who have come in. We're a good family, someone has, and you're saying, don't give this person the maximum. And be very careful, you may, Mr Meager, someone in your position may be doing that very same thing again at one stage. So just be wary of such prescription and give this very judge, and Madam Speaker, I'm coming back, give this very judge who is going to be appointed as a result of this, give them the ability to do their job, give them the ability to join things up. Because otherwise, yes, I heard the previous speaker say, isn't it wonderful, we're going to fill more jails up. Well, they cost money. And the other thing too, just be also, and here's a great thing, I actually believe, and some of my colleagues don't, I actually believe in we should actually sometimes make more use of imprisonment, but make smarter use of imprisonment. And I'll give you a really good example of that, Madam Speaker. Everyone talks about the New York law reforms. Well, we bought, when I was in the Police Association, we bought the Deputy Commissioner, who was Bratton's deputy at the time. And when those reforms went through, that was obviously going to result in a lot more people being arrested, a lot more people going to jail. Well, what the police did, they said to the city, look, don't worry about it. If the prisons get full, put them out at the top end. The fact they're going in at the bottom end is more important. So the fact of imprisonment is actually as important as a deterrent than the length of the imprisonment. And I actually honestly believe that, because actually we say he only got 12 months. Think about it. You know, as MPs, you have to be down here for 4 days away from home. Actually, 12 months is a very long time. 12 months is actually not a bad sentence, because it means that probably when that person comes out of prison, their partner will still be there. If you go for 4 years, their partner probably won't be there, and they'll be absolutely guaranteed to go straight back into it. I always remember I worked as an undercover police officer, and the most dangerous time for me as an undercover police officer, when I've infiltrated a group, I'm sitting in a bar and someone comes out of prison where they've been away for 3 years. And the first thing they'll do is look, and he's a new face, he might be a cop. So actually what they were going to do is go straight back into the very place that they'd been to. So, Madam Speaker, I know this is starting to get a little bit, I can see the look on your face, I've had it myself when I've been sitting in that chair, as to what this, but I go back to Mrs. Ferris's point, the bits are joined up. So we are going to shortly be passing legislation that gives one more judge there. But what I'll say is that the next time in the caucuses that we're going to be discussing what this person is going to be doing, let them be a judge. Look at the word, look what they're called judges. That means given the ability to make a judgment. Because what I fear is that there will be some quite big injustices. Go back, yes, there absolutely are people who should never see the light of day, and I'd be very happy that they never see the light of day. But on the other hand, there are people who the fact of jail, the fact they've just done 3 months, 6 months, sitting in their cells, scared of hell, who's going to come there in the middle of the night, that they will go and say, actually, I'm never going back there again. Leave them there for 2 or 3 years, and they'll become so adapted to the place, they'll be part of it, and actually by the time they come out of 3 years, they're going to go straight back in because they've got no ability to work on the outside. So all I would just say, we're going to appoint another judge, give him or her the ability to take into account some of the things that I have just talked about, so that when they do make a judgment, it's not AI, it's not tick, 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 bang. You might as well otherwise have a little robot sitting there. It's a bit like speakers in the House. Give them the ability to be a little bit different, Madam Speaker. So while commending this to the House, let's take this as an opportunity to actually be a bit smart, and the most important word in this whole bill is the word judge. Right. Let them judge. Right. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr O'Connor. That's very entertaining. I call Tom Rutherford.
Madam Speaker, if I could be a judge for a moment, I'd be giving that member a 10 out of 10 for energy, enthusiasm and hand gestures. What did he have? He found his inner Anna Lork and got the Barocca. He got up and had the Barocca and had a good time with the 10 minutes, and well done to the member for a great contribution. Madam Speaker, we seem to have sort of strayed a little bit on this debate. Fundamentally, it's about increasing the amount of district court judges from 182 to 183. It's simply all that is. We can talk about prisons and we can talk about institutional racism in some people's eyes, but ultimately, we're just increasing the district court judges from 182 to 183, and we're enabling it. That's all we're doing. And the reason we're doing it is because they've had an increased workload over the last couple of years and over recent times, and so we're giving them extra capability to do their job. So we could go on about why the causes of crime and what one side of the government will do versus the other side of the government, or we could just talk about the legislation, which is increasing the amount of district court judges from 182 to 183, and I commend it to the House.
Speaker.
I call Helen White.
Thank you. This is a job where we really are encouraged to think deeply about things. So while I take the member's point, I think it is very important we join the dots in this situation, because we have a movement of just a single judge, and we have that decision to do that because we have enormous delays in our system and they are feeling overwhelmed. Now, I wanted to take the example really of the Chief Judge, the District Court Chief Judge, who has brought an enormous amount to the role itself. And one of the things that he's a Māori man who's come up from the army. He came in as a mature student, and he's been a real leader in developing the district courts into a more responsive place. And they're doing incredible work. And he came up with a scheme which was called Te Marama. It became a framework for acting in this space and acting effectively in this space. And it's a really important thing that he immediately talks about the backlog in the courts. He immediately says it's really important we get these decisions out. But it isn't where he stopped. He actually talked about other things that were important if it was going to be an effective system. We have really good leads in the family court. We have, I think, Sandra Moran, and in the youth court we have Ida Malossi. They're incredible people. They're from backgrounds which probably there wouldn't have been a few years ago when my friend Greg O'Connor was talking about the way that the magistrates were. They are from very diverse backgrounds, and they bring all that to bear in their areas. And what the Chief Judge said is those areas are really important, and it's really important that when we put people into those positions and in those courts, we really need to make sure we're supporting those people in them. And he interestingly said, recognised that 83% of the people in our prisons who were 18, 19 and 20, they had been in state care, 83%. He also said that 50% of prisoners had been subject to family violence before they got there, and 60% of those were Māori. 70% of women in prison have been subject to family violence. So these are very, very real things. And so what he's trying to do is build a system which actually solves problems. He calls it solution-focused judging. He's trying to make sure that the judges are going in there and they're doing not a tick box exercise, but they're actually finding solutions so you don't have these people come back. So these are things that will hopefully be things that our new judge will be encouraged to do. Now, I've got to say I was concerned to see the support for boot camps and the financial support for those without any evidence, but the Chief District Court Judge was told with regard to these policies, which are informed by the actual work that those people have done, he had to prove they work before he got any funding for them. That's an interesting thing, isn't it? We've got these people who are highly skilled, they've come out of professions, and now I'm saying they're coming out of diverse communities, and they want to do these things. Are we actually adequately supporting them to do these things? And isn't that our responsibility, to think a bit deeply? Not to do what Carl Bates did on the other side of the House today, which is to suggest almost there's an alienness in what he says. He talks about these people, keeping these people inside. That's shallow thinking. These people are our children, our family. These people are us. And it's very, very important that we see those connections. These people are prisoners, but they're also victims, because those tend to come from the same place. I go back to that number. We have 83% of those 18, 19, 20-year-olds having been in state care. So that's a huge correlation. And so we are absolutely, it is our obligation in this House, when we are adding a new district court judge, to think really deeply about what we are doing and to think, okay, we'll do this, we'll add this resource, but are we really adding the support we need to these people who are deeply committed, passionate advocates for justice and for rehabilitation, for example? Are we adding? Now, I wanted just to have a talk about something. Thank you, Madam.
I call Ryan Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't want to get too judgmental about this. 183 sounds like a fantastic idea. I commend this bill to the House.
Well done. Very good. I think the time has come for the lunch break. This House is adjourned until 2 p.m. today.